But somehow Pablo walks out the backside of that prison. There was a photographer in Colombia that when all this was going down, his agency said, go up there and find out what's going on. Well, he got up there, he saw all the media there, and he thought, well, what could I do different? So he goes around to the back of the prison. You know, he has to go through the woods and the mountains. When he came around there, here comes Pablo and some of his inmates walking out. They got guns. And he said he laid his camera down on the ground and lays his hand. He said, I'm sorry, Pablo, I'm sorry. I was told to come and find out what's going on. That's all I'm doing here. And he said, Escobar looked at him and says, get your camera, take your pictures. You're looking at a dead man walking.
Guys, welcome back to the show. Today, it's been a long time coming. We did a quick, short one down in Beaufort, South Carolina, at the Corps Military Appreciation Weekend, which, as you're watching this, the tickets for that for next year in the end of February are live. So go check those out. It's a great weekend. But today, Mr. Steve Murphy is a retired DEA agent who played the key role into taking down Pablo Escobar, one of the most dangerous and powerful drug lords in history. He spent years in Colombia working alongside local law enforcement to dismantle the Medellin cartel. Did I say that correctly? Medellin
Close.
Cartel. Close. It's like you saying my name, right?
Okay.
Risking his life to bring to justice. His story is told in the book Manhunters, How We Took Down Pablo Escobar, and inspired the Netflix series Narcos. These days, Steve shares his experiences, offering a raw and honest look into the sacrifices, challenges, and victories of fighting organized crime on the front lines. On the Game of Crimes podcast, where yours truly was a guest on the best episode he's ever produced.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
check that out. Steve, welcome, man. This
thank
is
you,
good, man. And it's got to be surreal, man, being after all this is all done and kind of going into chapter. I don't know if I can't call it chapter 2 for you. It's probably chapter 47 at this point of life, right?
I'm getting up there.
But phenomenal book.
Thank you.
So welcome. Thanks for coming all the way up.
Thanks for having me.
So what led to you getting out and writing this? And did Javier write? Did you guys put this together?
That's a good question. So, you know, in federal law enforcement, you have mandatory retirement age is 57.
Yeah.
Now, the administrator can offer you a 3-year extension. Javier and I were both at the highest levels we could go. It's a senior executive service called a special agent in charge. And the administrator had offered us both a 3-year extension to go to 60. We were both 50. I was coming up on 57. Javier was already 57. And I had 2 daughters in college, so I needed a job.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
No, not at all. So, and we were living in Virginia, and they were both in-state schools, so that helped a lot. But
we're in Virginia.
One was going to Virginia Commonwealth.
Oh, where were you?
Oh, we were in Northern Virginia, just out. It's Loudoun County, a little
so
suburb
expensive.
called Ashford. Oh,
yeah,
you know,
that's where I was getting with even the more. I gotta stay employed.
It was outrageous. But a friend of ours called and former Marine that we'd worked with in Colombia. I hadn't talked to him in over 20 years. And he said, listen, there's after we called up a little bit, he said, there's a producer in Hollywood that wants to talk to you and Javier about your story with Escobar. And we had, about a year earlier, we'd already been through 2 different producers. Another friend had introduced me, and you know, you kind of get your hopes up that maybe somebody wants to do something with your story.
Yeah.
But the first 2 producers wanted to make a political statement with it. And I have my thoughts about politics, but I try to stay apolitical as much as possible. So, you know, you got your hopes up, you got your hopes dashed. And so when this guy called, I said, you know what, thanks, but no thanks. Tell the guy we're not interested. Well, you know how you...
Did he kind of lean in on like what side he was trying to make a point of?
Well, he says they wanted to tell the real story.
Okay.
But that's what the first 2 said also. So I told this guy, I told this former Marine, you know, thanks, but no thanks. And I mean, you know how you guys are. He starts busting my balls. I mean, just unmercifully on the phone. You SOB, you MF, you know, I haven't talked to you in 20 years. You can't do me a simple favor. I'm like, whoa, okay. I'll call the guy. Good grief.
Yeah.
So I called a guy named Eric Newman, who was the creator of the Narcos series. And he gave me a little spiel on the phone. Very nice on the phone. And I said, you know what, thank you, but no thank you. And
really?
He got real quiet. And I figured he probably fell out of his chair because we have since learned that people will sell their soul to be in Hollywood.
Right.
So he said, what is the problem here? And I said, well, we've been down this road twice. It just never works out. And
so I'm just going to stop you before getting further.
Don't waste my time or your time. Yeah. So he said, well, listen, I'm coming. This was in February of 2013.
Okay.
He said, I'm coming to Washington on another business matter with 2 writers. Would you meet us for dinner? Just let us give you our spiel, and then if you say no, it's no. And this is the truth right here, Nick. I'm thinking, that's going to be a free dinner at a really nice restaurant. I said, yes, I will.
Yeah.
So I did. They came in March. They gave me their little talk there at dinner, and I'm, I'm kind of an idiot, so I like to have fun whatever I'm doing. And when I walked in the restaurant, after 38 years as a cop, you can pick people out that you're looking for.
Yeah.
So I saw these 3 guys sitting at the table, and they're dressed nice, and I've got a suit on because I've been at work. And I just came over and leaned on the table, and I said, gentlemen, one of you is holding cocaine. I need to get your ass up on the wall, spread them. The 2 writers are like, their eyes are getting big, their mouths dropping over, and Eric knew what was going on. He just busted out laughing, and that kind of broke the tension. And, and that's how I introduced myself to him. So
they're all looking at each other like, is it you? It's not me.
Who is this guy?
Who is this?
So over dinner, we'd had a good discussion. At the end of the night, Eric said, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I'll talk to Javier and let's pursue this and just see where it goes.
Yeah.
And he said, why are you guys so hesitant to tell your story? I said, Eric, the last thing we ever want anybody to do is glorify a guy named Pablo Escobar. This guy's nothing more than a mass murderer. He's responsible for thousands and thousands of
evil human being, yeah.
Evil walking on the face of our earth. So, and he promised me that night, he said, I promise you we will never glorify him. And to this day, that was in 2013, he's lived up to his word.
Yeah.
So that was March of 2013. You can't work for the government and make money on the side unless you're in Congress. And it's funny how they get to do it, but we can't. It's funny how people go into Congress with nothing and they come out multimillionaires, isn't it?
Like multi-millionaires.
Yeah. But again, I'm trying to stay apolitical.
We're going to get into all that.
So that was March. By May, we had signed contracts with, not with Netflix, but with a company called Gaumont International Television.
They sold it, yeah.
Yeah. And then I pulled the pin at the end of June. In July, we were sitting in Hollywood writing the first season of Narcos.
Wow. And this was already done at the time?
No. People had told us our whole lives that we should write a book. And I thought, well, when I retire, I'll give it a shot. So I retired, went to Hollywood for a week. We thought we would be on site filming and all that. You spend a week in Hollywood each year, and then everything else is done on the phone and the internet.
Yeah. And
then they did bring us down for trips once they filmed in Colombia, but it was just more to be nice to us, to placate us a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. But little marketing effort there. Yeah.
Yeah. They gave us a little cameo in season 2, but we're on screen for like 3 seconds.
I missed it.
Yeah, well, that's how short the scene was. But at home, I sat down and believe it or not, it's the first time my wife was still working as a nurse. It's the first time I've ever had all of my honeydews done. I mean, I had time every day. I lost weight. I had a good suntan. I was looking good, feeling good. And I sat down one day to start writing, and I wrote for maybe 6 hours.
No kidding.
Starting jotting my
notes.
First
time.
Well, 2 days later, I went back and read it, and I thought, what a bunch of crap. It was terrible. So I kind of gave up on that idea. But one thing we did is when we negotiated our contract with Gaumont is we put a clause in there that we maintain the right to write a book of our own because they bought our life rights to our story. So it turns out that Eric Newman, the creator, the executive producer of Narcos, grew up with a guy named Luke Janklow. Luke's father was the president of Janklow and Nesbitt, one of the largest literary agencies in the world. So Eric introduced us to Luke, who was he's now the CEO, took his dad's place. We flew to New York, met with him. Just great guy. What a prince of a guy. Just, he's going to represent us. Found us a ghostwriter because I didn't even show him what I wrote.
Somebody can tell a story.
Well, and it's Isabel Vincent is her name. She's a investigative reporter for the New York Post. She'd already written 3 or 4 books, successful books. She knows how to dig and find information. So we flew to New York, met with her a couple of times. Everything else was emails and telephone calls. And when the book came out, it was after, it was after the first season of Narcos.
Oh, well, that's a good plan.
That helped promote.
Absolutely.
And Luke found us our publisher, which is St. Martin's Press. So it's the same. We get the same publishers, Jocko Willink,
Right.
and the same executive vice president is the editor up there, Mark Resnick. And when the book was ready to come out, you can see on the front there, they were able to reach out to Netflix and allow us to use, the Narcos name.
Because it benefits both.
It did.
Yeah.
But they are so protective of everything. Your contract says they own the rights to everything.
Yeah.
And, we came out with our little business, DEA Narcos, and they got upset because we used the word narcos. Well, I don't just accept what people tell me. I challenge them. And so the person I was talking to, I won't mention the person's name because I really respect them, but they're telling me they're going to sue us if we don't start. And I'm like, I don't remember anywhere where do you have copyrights to the word narcos? And they said, well, no, of course not. I said, well, that's what you're telling me I can't use it. If you don't own the word, why can't I use it? And it got a little heated, then it calmed down, and we came to an agreement. But they still don't like it a whole lot that we use DEA Narcos, but they've been gracious enough to not give us a hard time.
You can't own the word narcos.
It's amazing.
But that's what they think. They really do believe that they can do things like that.
They do.
They're like, no, that's mine. No, and it's just a word. And
the person that challenged us, I have the utmost respect for. We've gotten to be friends over the years, and actually have met in person a couple of times. So, but it was just, I tell you what, it was a couple of fish out of water trying to deal with Hollywood. We hired an entertainment attorney in Washington, D.C., because I lived right outside of D.C. Mm-hmm. Quite honestly, I did more negotiating on the contract than he did.
Isn't that interesting how that I find myself in the same seat? It's
horrible. And quite honestly, our saving grace was Eric Newman. Mm-hmm. He got us more money than we should have gotten probably. And it's kind of worked out pretty good in the long run. Our speaking business, once Narcos came out, our worldwide speaking business took off. The first 4 years before COVID, we averaged 75 shows a year for 4 years.
Wow.
And that was all around the world. I saw my partner Javier more than I saw my wife. But my marriage was stronger than ever. I didn't understand that.
No, we're fine. You're fine. We're fine. Just
don't you have to go somewhere?
Yeah, keep speaking. Excellent. So Steve, where did you grow up? Like what before law enforcement? Where were you at?
Well, I was born in Memphis. When I was 2 years old, my mom and dad moved to Murfreesboro, just south of Nashville. Mm-hmm. My dad was a Southern Baptist minister, so my sister and I grew up in a pretty strict household. To give you an example, my sister did not wear pants until she turned 18 and moved out of the house.
Oh, wow.
So it was
usually that kind of raising, you go the opposite direction. You become the criminal.
Well, I had my first run-in with the cops at 10.
Okay, all right. So there's something there.
Yeah, that if you hear the old saying, preacher's kids are the worst. Well, if you look up PK in the dictionary, it might have my picture in there. Yeah. And it was a funny story because my buddies and I, we were camping out, we lived down on the skirts of town, and it was a summer night in Tennessee and warm. And so about 1 o'clock in the morning, we were riding our bicycles out through the neighborhood, and there's an all-night laundromat there. So we went up to get on the vending machines, and of course nobody had any money. So one of the guys had an idea, hey, let's go break in a house. Okay, sounds good to me. So we go to a house, and we're trying to plot how we're going to break into this house through a window. And lo and behold, a cruiser shows up, hits us with that spotlight, and we're like deer in the headlights, man. I mean, we're frozen. I mean, we're petrified. Didn't even try to run. And 2 police officers came over and asked us what we're doing, and we laid everything out, and they kind of chuckled. And this is back when police officers had a lot of discretion on how to handle a situation.
Yeah.
So they said, well, boys, you got a decision to make tonight. So you either come with us and go to jail for the rest of your lives, or we can take you home to your parents. We looked at each other and said, take us to jail. I knew what was going to happen when I got home.
At least in jail, he can't get me.
Oh, my goodness. I tell you what, I didn't sit down for a couple of weeks, and my dad, God bless him. He was a good father. He set a good example for me. He's a military veteran, fought in World War II in Europe. Went through Bastogne after Easy Company. I mean, I think the world of him. Probably the most intelligent man I've ever met. The strongest man I've ever met. Mm-hmm. He was 6'4". After he retired from the ministry, he had a carpet store. And before they had a tow motor, some of these rolls of carpet will weigh 1,200, 1,300 pounds.
Yeah.
And so in the back of the store where all the stock was, we would get 4 guys on one end with 2 steel bars and lift up that end. My dad would lift up the other end by himself. I mean, just not somebody you wanted to tick off.
Yeah, yeah.
But
so that jail time looked a lot better in the moment.
I just, I mean, I got to say, every time I got a spanking, I deserved it.
Was that the end of your criminal career?
I had a few more little run-ins. Probably nothing else on the felony level.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
That thin blue line they talk about in law enforcement.
Yeah.
There's most of us could have gone left as well as right.
I'm right there with you. I think I told you on your show, I was 2 felonies by the time I was 13 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. It was eye-opening. I had no idea.
Yeah. So where did the pursuit in the law enforcement come? Like, what happened, post high school?
Well, so
when did you get bit by the bug?
Well, you know what? I think it probably happened that first run-in with the cops. Because, I mean, these guys were looking good. They looked good in their uniforms. They weren't slouchy, dumpy-looking guys. They were in shape. Didn't have any facial hair back then. They had it high and tight. And it just I think it left a positive impression on me.
Here's a question. I'm not going to say what year this was, but were majority of law enforcement like that then?
Yes. Yeah. So this was
quite a contrast from today.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like the mustache, if I had this mustache, I would have to shave it up above the corners of my lips.
Really?
And they really frowned on a mustache, to be quite honest with you, back then.
Yeah.
But as I was getting ready to go into high school, my mom and dad are originally from southern West Virginia. And my dad had retired from the ministry. He was in the carpet business. So they decided to move back closer to their families, their parents. So we picked up and moved to a little town called Princeton, West Virginia, in southern West Virginia. So I went to high school and college in West Virginia. I was the only, so my dad and my uncle owned the carpet store. I was the only boy in both families. So it was always anticipated that I would take over the business. I started at 14 years old working for my dad. I hated it then. And, all these years later, I still hate the carpet business. That's manual labor.
So you're not laying carpet in your own house these days?
I used to, but now my knees, not going to do it anymore. This new knee on the left side it's doing good, but
still need to push it.
It's not like when you're 30 years old, Yeah. But so I went to college at West Virginia University, started out there in business, hated it. Way too young. Honestly, I was way too immature, way too young to be away from home. Mm-hmm. Joined a fraternity. I partied for a whole semester, got my grades, and I was on academic probation. And Dad said, "I'm not paying for that." So I came home. I made it one semester.
And that was it.
Well, then I enrolled in the local state college, but they had just started a criminal justice program, and I still wanted to be a cop. That's all I ever wanted to do. And so I went and enrolled at Bluefield State College over in Bluefield, West Virginia, enrolled in the criminal justice program without telling my parents. And I guess they presumed I was still in business, although I didn't give them enough credit because they're a lot smarter than I thought they were.
Yeah.
So that was January of 75. Just loved it. Man, I was acing all the CJ classes. That summer they had their first internship program, so I signed up for 2 summer sessions. I did 5 weeks with the city police, 5 weeks with the sheriff's department.
So what are you doing at that time? So in the mid-70s, what are you doing as an intern?
Just riding along, going out on calls with them. The sheriff's department kind of got stuck in the jail and doing prisoner transports, which it's not what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But with the city, they would let me go out on patrols, and I'd spend a week on days, a week on evenings, a week on nights, and then the last 2 weeks, I think I came and went kind of like I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Then back in college for the fall semester, 75, and the criminal justice professor, a guy named Gary Willis, came to me and he says, "Hey, listen, they're offering the civil service exam. You ought to go take it." Well, I was 18 years old, and I'm like, I don't think that I'm quite ready for that. And he said, no, you go take the test to learn how they give the test so that when you're ready, you'll know what to expect.
Yeah.
So I went and took the test, came out number 1 on it.
At 18 years old?
At 18 years old. So I went ahead and applied for the city. The chief there already knew me. This is a little 35-man department, okay, so it's not a major department. Yeah. And he already knew me, and we'd kind of gotten along, so he offered me a job. I started as a police officer 1 month after I turned 19 years old.
And you were still in school?
I was in college. The city provided your uniforms and things like that, but you had to provide your own gun belt and your own weapon. I wasn't old enough to buy a gun.
What?
I couldn't even buy bullets. So
how'd they get around that?
well, one of my buddies in the police department, I gave him the money and I bought a Colt 4-inch Python, blue steel. I love that.
But you couldn't buy it, but you were authorized to carry it.
I could kill you if I had to, based on law, but I couldn't buy the gun. And and my dad bought he bought me about 1,000 rounds of bullets so I could practice. And that's how.
At this point, you told your parents. Obviously, your parents know that.
Oh yeah, they had figured it out long ago.
Yeah.
And so my dad, he didn't openly support me, but he didn't object to me trying it.
Okay.
And after I'd been on,
Was there a reason you think?
I think he's trying to let me find my own way. He's trying to teach me responsibility to make good decisions.
I mean, but do you think that there was any objection to him, from him?
I think he was more worried about my safety than anything else.
Just knowing what he knew from World War II and
Yeah,
the reality of the world.
and growing up, I wasn't a tough guy, and
Yeah.
I had a few fights here and there, but I never pretended to be a tough guy. I just wanted to get along with everybody, and I looked at law enforcement more as an opportunity to help others. It wasn't the macho thing of, I liked wearing the uniform. I mean, it's easy to decide what you're going to wear to work each day, right? Like in the military. But I haven't met a cop yet. I was a cop for 38 years. I haven't met a cop yet that joined up to kill people. Everybody you talk to, now there are some bad apples that come along, and hopefully we can weed them out. And when they go to prison, they should, in my opinion, they should go to prison the rest of their lives, because they took an oath to protect the public and defend our country and our Constitution. And then when you betray that oath,
it's not the goal. It should not be the goal.
Right.
Right.
I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. On my podcast, I like to say nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop.
Yeah.
So
I experienced that. It was interesting. I had even when I was going through what I went through with the raid on the gym, I had more support from law enforcement than I'd ever had ever. And they were like that. They were like absolutely wrong, breaking the law, and it was overwhelming. It was nice. But I figured as much.
Well, there are some guys that get that badge, and all of a sudden they think they're Supermen.
Yeah.
They think they walk on water.
A power trip thing.
Yeah. And if that's why you're going in the job, do me a favor and go get you another job, because you make us all look bad.
Yeah.
We don't need any help. We got enough idiots as it is. A few make us all look bad.
So how long did you do as a cop there in the city?
I was uniformed for 6 years. Got married the first time. I was making $9,600 a year. We had 2 sons. I'm working every job I can. I put my wife through college.
On 10 grand.
Yeah. Well, then I'm working every off-duty job I can get. I'm working all the overtime I can get.
When did you finish school? Did you finish school while you were on the job?
It took me 11 years to get a 4-year degree.
I got you beat. It took me 11 years to get a 2-year degree.
So I graduated high school in 74. I got my college degree in 85.
Wow. Okay.
But I picked up the contract for Bluefield State College for their sporting events. So I had the contract on that. I even sold Amway. I don't even know if you know what Amway is.
Oh yeah.
Worked as an electrician's helper for one of the local firemen. I mean, just whatever you could do to make ends meet. And then trying to go to college while you're doing all that.
Did you ever buy a house, or did you rent?
We bought a little house, a little 2-bedroom house that my mother-in-law at that time was a real estate agent. I think we paid $20,000 for this little house. It was pretty run down. It needed a lot of work. My mortgage was $104 a month.
Isn't that crazy? And now you're thinking about today. I talk a lot about over the decades of what the difference between the median income that the person has in the United States back then, the difference of a mortgage back then, what a house cost, just the average, and then today, and how that gap has grown so drastically.
It's outrageous.
It's outrageous, and it's sad, because I feel like one of the things about being American is ownership. Owning the land that you live on. At least I think any family should have the opportunity to own a home. And it's sad the direction that things have taken. Hopefully things are getting better. But
it's,
anyways.
you know, I don't say any of this tooting my own horn. You know, I just feel blessed that I am where I am today. I'm still alive. But
you're definitely on borrowed time, as am I.
Well, you know, my wife and I, so that first marriage didn't last but 3 years. And then shortly thereafter, I met my current wife. We've been married 40 years. So I think this one will probably last. Yeah, thank you.
At this point, you can't get rid of each other.
Oh, I tell you what, man, when I first met her, I used to ride motorcycles. She owned her own motorcycle.
Wow.
How can you not love a woman that owns her own motorcycle? She's not a biker chick.
This is in the late 70s then, right? Or early 80s?
Connie and I met, in 84, and then married in 87.
84. I was 2, Steve.
You young whippersnappers. No respect for your elders. But, I mean, she was a tough girl. She was adventuresome, just willing to do anything. When I went from the city police to the railroad police, and I moved down to Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
Spent a couple years down there, back to West Virginia for 4 more years. Got in a shooting with the city police were in a shooting. I was out on the midnight shift one night, and I heard gunshots just a couple blocks away. So, you know, being the nosy person I am, I go to investigate. And there's a police officer by himself exchanging gunfire with a guy in the 3rd floor window. He's got the high ground shooting down on the cop. So I zipped down there, and the police officer was a rookie. You know, we're all crouched down, and I said, you got help on the way, right? And, you know, he grabbed he hadn't even called for help yet.
Oh, shit.
That's the first thing I do, but I want odds in my favor. So what had happened is the guy in the window had come home and found his wife in bed with another guy. So is that you know, the bad guy, I guess, is running away. He shoots him in the butt. Well, that guy made it to the sidewalk, and he's laying on the sidewalk. He can't, you know, he's wounded too bad. He can't get himself into a safe position.
Yeah.
And this guy's leading out, trying to shoot down and kill him. I've got a .44 Magnum.
Jeez.
And then shooting at the cop because the cop's shooting at him. So I ran over and grabbed the guy, and there was a recessed doorway, and I dragged him up in the doorway so this guy couldn't kill him. And then backup showed up, and it's funny. We killed that building deader in hell, but we never hit the bad guy. And eventually he gave up and surrendered. Well, this was a Saturday night, Sunday morning type thing, about 3 o'clock in the morning. I go in, you know, help them process the crime scene and everything. Go into the office about 6:30 and call my boss, my railroad police boss, and said, "Hey, Chief, I was involved in a shooting with the city police. Just, you know, giving you a heads up." And he's like, "Okay, I'm on my way in." So he comes in and he is irate. At me, and he's like, "What in the world do you think you're doing?" Now he talks like Elmer Fudd. Seriously, I'm not making this up. And so when you add that voice to him being mad, it was kind of comical. So I might have smiled a couple of times, and that wasn't a good thing to do either. But he said, "Give me your weapon." And so at that time I had a Smith & Wesson Model 15 snub nose. And so I opened the cylinder, dumped the shells, and handed him the weapon. He started yelling, "Why do you dump the rounds out of your gun? How do I know how many rounds you're fired?" And I'm like, "Do you think I'm walking around with a gun that doesn't have 6 live rounds in it?" I reloaded.
Did you say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I said, and the other thing is, I'm a former firearms instructor. You don't hand a loaded weapon to somebody. You hand them an empty weapon.
Yeah.
So that didn't help matters. And we went back and forth. And he told me right then, he said, "I'm going to get you fired over this." For helping another police officer? I said, "Chief, I'm the only railroad cop on duty for 26 counties. Who do you think I call for help?" You know, and he just wasn't hearing it. So it was, at 7:30 was my quitting time, and he wanted you out at 7:30 because he wanted to pay overtime.
Yeah.
And as I'm walking out the door, he said, "You haven't heard the end of this." And I said, "Chief, just so you know, given the same set of circumstances, I will respond the same way again." And slammed the door and walked out, you know. Well, luckily the hierarchy of the railroad police had all been real cops because my chief had not been. He was a clerk on the railroad, and, you know, I don't know if he kissed somebody's butt or whatever to get the position, but cooler heads prevailed. They said, "Don't worry about it, Murph. We'll take care of him." They did nothing. So what that did is that gave me the incentive to finish getting my degree.
Mm-hmm.
I got a commendation from the city, you know, a mayoral proclamation for coming to the aid of a police officer in need.
That'd be kind of bad PR if he fired you after that.
Oh, yeah. And this was my old police department, so, you know, they're looking out for me as well.
Right.
So another railroad police officer, Pete Ramey, had been a former Virginia State trooper. Pete had worked with the DEA task force out of Roanoke, Virginia, and he would tell me all these stories about DEA, and I thought, man, I've always been interested in narcotics cases. I just think that's a really cool challenge. And, excuse me, he told me about working with DEA, and I didn't even know, I'd never heard of DEA. I knew the FBI, ATF, Marshals, but I didn't know what DEA was. So when I got my degree, I applied for DEA. It took 2 years to get hired. Finally got accepted in 1987. Went to the academy in June of 87. Came out in September. My first post, I put in, you get a wish list.
Well, what was the process of doing the DA? Like in that time, how long, how'd you get in there?
Well, you file your application and they, do medical tests. You did an extensive background, criminal record check. There was no psychological back then, and there was no lie detector.
Really?
Because if they'd done a psychological, I might not be a cop. No, it wasn't as involved as it is today, but it took forever. I mean, it took 2 years.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of people would just give up by then, or they've got another job that they don't want to give up.
I think that's still pretty normal. I mean, I've got a friend in the Marshals, and I think it took him about 2 years to get in. It's a slow process.
It really is. And you know what? So I'm living in southern West Virginia. I just took a cold trip, drove up to Washington, D.C., because that was the division that West Virginia in was called the Washington Field Division. Mm-hmm. And so the recruiter is in the D.C. area. So I didn't make any phone calls. I just showed up to the office one day, knocked on the door. I said, I'd like to speak.
You hiring?
I said, I'd like to speak to the recruiter, please. And just so, things happen, the divine intervention.
Yeah.
Just so happened Charlie West was the recruiter who ended up being a friend of mine later on in life. But he was the recruiter, and he came walking down. He's like, "Who are you?" And so I explained. He said, "Do you and I have an appointment?" And I said, "No, I just came up here." And he's like, "And how far did you drive?" And I said, "Well, about 6 hours." He's like, "You drove up here 6 hours on the chance that I would be here to find out about your application?" I said, "Yeah, I want the job." He said, "Let me go check." And so he comes back about 15 minutes later, and he says, "Found your application." He said, "I'll be honest with you, it's on the bottom of the pile." He said, "But it's now on the top of the pile." So he pushed it on
There's a
through.
life lesson for everybody listening right there.
Hey, how bad do you want it?
How bad do you want it?
What are you willing to do?
Yep.
So, and it all comes to getting your priorities in order, in my, merciless little way of thinking. But eventually got the phone call, went to the academy. My wish list I put in for Norfolk, Virginia, Wilmington, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, and you had to put a division office in. So I put in Miami. Well, with Murphy's Law, I ended up in Miami.
What was happening here at that time?
In Miami?
In Wilmington.
Oh, it just didn't seem like a nice place to live.
It is a nice place to live.
I was looking for. I knew Virginia Beach and Norfolk area, Tidewater very well.
Yeah.
I knew Charleston. I knew a little bit about Jacksonville, and I didn't know jack about Miami.
It seems like Wilmington would have been a good spot for you.
People here talk like me.
Right. I think you would fit right in.
Yep. Well, I tell everybody between Tennessee
They're
and
like, nah, we're sending him to Miami.
Yeah, made a lot of sense. But between Tennessee and West Virginia, I'm a cross between a redneck and a hillbilly.
Yeah.
I'm good with it though. I know what I am. But getting to Miami in 1987, it was still the Wild West.
Yeah.
You talk about a fish out of water. Holy cow. My wife and I, we got down there. And here's the first time she gave up her career for me. So we get down there and we get an apartment, and then we're going to look for a house. We go out on the weekends to shopping centers and just try to learn our way around Fort Lauderdale. We lived out in Plantation. And we were walking through the shopping center one time, and there was this big, looked like a warehouse store. So we went to walk in, and the people stopped and said, "Can we see your membership card?" I said, "My membership card? What are you talking about?" They said, "Well, you've got to be a member to shop here." I'm like, I got to be a member to come and spend my money in your store? How does that make sense? And I got pissed off. I'm like, the heck with this? We left. Well, it was BJ's Warehouse.
Yeah.
We didn't even know what a warehouse shopping place was.
Right.
We would go to movies. We didn't have a lot back then. My wife and I lived in a trailer when we first got married because that's all we could afford in West Virginia. We go to the Saturday matinees because that was a cheaper one.
What was your DEA salary back then? Do you remember?
It was actually, I took a pay cut from the railroad. But the railroad I was probably making $40,000 So starting with DEA was
that's
in the
good
30s.
back then.
It was a whole lot better in the city.
Yeah.
But, and then, I mean,
So a federal agent in the 30s.
yeah.
Wow.
But it grew considerably over the years.
Yeah, I could imagine.
But we were just amazed that the guys in the office, I was working out of the Miami office, and we, as a group, would go out for lunch somewhere, and we go to one of the Hispanic restaurants, and they bring me a menu in Spanish. I'm like, did we drive across a bridge and end up in Cuba? I can't read this crap. And then the waitress she couldn't speak English. I'm like, where the hell are we? You know, and that's how naive I was.
Yeah.
I mean, totally a fish out of water.
And this is the world you're stepping into for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, so when I got to Miami, this is in the book, the most powder cocaine I'd ever seen at one time, at 12 years as a police officer, was 2 ounces, a baggie about like this. The first undercover trip I went on, we took an undercover yacht, 53-foot Hatter sport fisherman, which I didn't even know what it was. I know what a john boat is because I used to bass fish on the river. Took us 5 days to get to the Turks and Caicos Islands, which I'd never even heard of. We're the 2 boat captains and me. We were the only people on the crew, and the boat captains were both undercover agents. A plane flew in from Cuba, a twin-engine plane. When it landed in Providenciales, you know, they have a runway. They don't have a taxiway because it's a small airport. So it goes to the end of the runway. As it turns around to come back up to the terminal, the back door flies open, and they throw out all these duffel bags containing 400 kilos of coke. So I go from 2 ounces to 880 pounds of coke. Nick, I was addicted to cocaine at that point, buddy, just in a different way.
What was the monetary amount of that back then?
I can't count that high. It was back then, a kilo wholesale was going for probably 26,000.
Oh, wow.
Times per kilo. So that's 26,000 times 400, whatever that is. And we were transporters. That was our undercover role. We're getting paid about $3,500 per kilo to transport that 400 kilos from Turks and Caicos to Miami, to South Florida. And at least that's the negotiation. And those kind of deals too, you get, one of the things that you'd ask for is front money. So you get $50,000 front money to cover expenses, to pay off officials. You know, I mean, you're not really doing it, but you're pretending to be a bad guy. So that's what would typically happen. So we took the DEA flew the plane down from Miami. We loaded all the coke on the plane. I was the chain of custody guy, so I flew back with the evidence. The 2 boat captains eventually made their way back to Fort Lauderdale with the undercover boat. We tried to set up a controlled delivery, and we kept making, it would typically, we told them it's going to take a couple of weeks to get the boat back up because we're going to take a very circuitous route to make it look like we've been out fishing and vacationing and all that kind of stuff, not straight back into Fort Lauderdale. And so eventually we took everybody down. The purpose of the case, I'm a newbie. I'm a new agent. So I'm working with a senior guy, Gene Frankar, and Gene had been working this case for a couple of years with a couple of really good informants. The focus of the case was to prove that Cuba was being used as a transshipment point for cocaine coming out of Colombia into South Florida. Mm-hmm. So now this is where I learned how, I don't want to say powerful, but how much pull DEA had with other government agencies. So come down to Fort Lauderdale, the boat is a twin engine. We hit a shallow reef, and it bent the props on one of the motors. So we limped into Nassau. We called DEA in Miami. They had a DEA plane fly us a new propeller over. There was a Navy subtender close by, so they made calls to DOD. They had this subtender come towards Nassau. 2 guys came over, 2 divers, came over to where we had limped into Nassau, got under the boat, put our new prop on, and away we went.
How long did that whole thing take?
Less than a day.
Wow. I don't think you could pull that off now.
Probably not.
I don't think that would happen today.
Well, then
I think it'd be like, you guys better figure it out.
Yeah. Well, then the plane coming out of Cuba, we had made calls to the Air Force, so they had a P3 up, the radar plane.
Wow.
And that way, that's how we know without a doubt where the plane came from. And then after it dumped the coke, it refueled and it took off, and they tracked it right back into Cuba. So the goal, my partner, and I don't get credit for any of this because I'm just the new guy.
Yeah.
Gene was going to indict Raul Castro, Fidel's brother. Mm-hmm. And so he's ready to go to grand jury, and that's the first time I've ever experienced, it wasn't the last time, but the first time I experienced a call coming from the White House through the chain of command that said, you're not indicting anybody on that.
Yeah.
Or at least you're not indicting the Castros.
Right.
Well,
There might have been some other stuff going on at the same time.
I like that look.
Yeah.
But and I tell you what happened is word finally got back to Fidel and Raul about it. So what they did is they sacrificed 4 Cuban generals. They said, "Oh, these guys, we didn't know they were doing this. They were allowing cocaine to come into Cuba and go to the United States." So he executed them, 4 generals.
Well, that's the way they do things.
Things happen.
Yeah. So when you were there, this just reminded me, that time frame, were you there? And I don't remember her name. There was a female that pretty much ran cocaine in Miami for a while.
Griselda Blanco.
Yes.
She was before my time.
That was before. That was before the 80s. Okay. So who was really running? Was there anybody in Miami running stuff, or was it all external?
It was the Medellin cartel. And
So
they even had an agreement with the Cali cartel that they had Miami and Cali had New York.
So that's where I was kind of going with this, is how did you end up in, like, from there, how did you end up in Colombia? But I guess you were, right from the jump start, you were fighting the same bad guys.
It was. I never had a case that got to that level. You know, eventually after you've got some experience and some time on the job, you become your case agent of your own cases.
Yeah.
So my first case as a case agent, we brought in, working with customs, we brought in 500 kilos from Haiti on a coastal freighter up the Miami River. I'm not kidding you. I didn't even know there was that much cocaine in the world at one time. It was very eye-opening. In 1989, we were, one of the senior agents came in the summer of 89 and said, "Hey, it was a Friday, we're going to do a 17 kilo by bus today." And that's where the undercover either buys or sells the cocaine. You represent yourself as that. So my partner, Kevin Stevens, and I, and a third agent, we were the inside arrest team. We had an undercover agent and an informant. We're in a house in Hialeah in a neighborhood. Got 2 backup teams dispersed out through the neighborhood. The bad guys show up. They bring in 2 packages that, they're represented to be cocaine. Our undercover agent takes the first package and starts doing a field test. And the next thing you know, we're in the back bedroom hiding. We hear the undercover begging for his life. He says, "Please don't shoot us. Please don't shoot us. The money's in the car. Just don't shoot us." So long story short, we ended up in a little shootout there, and my partner Kevin got hit twice in the right arm with 45 caliber slugs.
Oh.
I mean, closer than you and I. He winged the bad guy. As Kevin's falling down, he slams the door shut. Guy keeps shooting through the door. We, killed that door better than hell. But the guy ran out of ammo, and he ran. Well, the second bad guy had a .357 revolver. He had full-blown HIV, so he really couldn't run. He was kind of a hobble. Mm-hmm. As he's making his escape, he turns around and fires 3 shots into the house to I guess, kind of cover their escape.
Yeah.
About the time the informant stood up, and he caught one right in the Adam's apple. So he died on scene. Eventually called everybody. Kevin survived. Took him a year to recuperate. His right arm is still screwed up, but at the time we had
a lot of damage.
We had an administrator that stood by our people, Michelle Linhart. And they let him stay on the job. I mean, he taught himself to write left-handed. His primary shooting hand now became his left hand. Mm-hmm. Former Marine. Back then, we used to have, every 6 months, we had mandatory PT tests. He would come in on injury leave and do more one-handed push-ups than I could do two-handed push-ups. Smart ass. So, but he's retired now, lives down in Sarasota.
Good for him. So what was the connection? How did you land the Columbia Station assignment?
Well, I had been working some cases with our office out of Barranquilla, some money laundering cases, and one of the cases we seized $1.3 million cash. I'd never seen money like that. I mean, people say, weren't you tempted to sell it? It's like monopoly money. It just doesn't seem real.
Yeah.
And then compared to today's standards, that was a small seizure, but back then that was pretty big. So my wife was working at Plantation General Hospital, and she was in a cardiac cath unit, and she always likes, see, what she does I think is gross, because she likes the trauma, she likes the ER, the ICUs. I mean, all the blood and guts, she really likes that. She thinks I'm crazy with my job. But anyways, she said, this has been pretty exciting here in Miami. She said, what's the next most exciting thing we can do? I said, well, we could go to Columbia and get stationed down there. And, she looks at me like I got 4 eyes on my face. And I'll be honest with you, my wife's the kind of person, if you tell her what she's going to do, it ain't happening.
Yeah.
So I know just to back off and let her think about it. So she came to me a couple of weeks later, and she said, were you serious? I said, yeah. And she said, if we're going to do it, let's do it while we're young. So
How long you had been DEA when?
4 years.
So you went out there for 4 years.
Well, actually, it was probably 3.5 because I had to go to language school for 6 months to learn Spanish. So I guess it was 3.5. And I was actually selected to go to Barranquilla first. In DEA, if you're getting a transfer like that, you're going away party, you throw your own party, and everybody else comes and drinks on you.
Yeah, right.
So we'd already thrown the party, and then they rescinded my transfer because they needed a Spanish speaker right away. And a guy from headquarters called me. He says, "Hey, you just got screwed." He said, "We're going to post 3 jobs to Bogota. If you want those, we'll do what we can to get you one of those." And that's how I got selected. So go to language school for 6 months in Washington.
How'd you do?
You had to score a 2.2. I got a 2.2. But you hear my accent when I speak Spanish, it comes out like "Hola, y'all." But so we go down there, and here was the problem. I could speak Spanish, and they understood everything I said, but they taught me how to speak proper Spanish.
Right.
I don't speak proper English.
Right.
So they would answer me in colloquial sayings.
And they don't speak proper.
No, Spanish.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So they would use their local dialects and colloquial sayings. I'm thinking, I never learned that in Colombia, in Spanish school. But that first weekend I was there was when Pablo Escobar surrendered to his custom-built prison. So what that did is
Interesting. So the show's a little bit different then.
Oh yeah, there's a lot in the show that's not true.
Okay.
It showed you in 1979. I was on the trailers. They showed in 1979 I was chasing that kid over in flip flops over a pound of weed.
Yeah.
1979 I was a uniform officer in West Virginia. Never even been to Miami.
Didn't speak Spanish.
No,
definitely wasn't in Colombia. Yeah.
Some people weren't real sure I was speaking English with my accent. But got down there and met Javier Pena, and he was partnered up with a guy named Gary Sheridan at the time. And Gary and I had some common law enforcement contacts in the United States. So he and I got to be friends very quickly. And then I got to know Javier, and Gary got promoted and moved to Barranquilla. So that left Javier and I to be partners. Well, Pablo was in prison for that first year that I was there. But what that did
Prison.
it's country club.
Yeah.
But that gave me an opportunity to go through the case files and learn about him and start working with the Colombian National Police. And
because at that time, even though he was in his country, he's locked up in his country club, he was still operating.
Oh yeah,
everything was still moving. He was just protected, basically.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about coming up with a plan that benefited him. He did.
Can't say he was stupid.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. So then when Pablo, one of the good things was when I got there, Javier had already been there 3 years.
Well, I was going to ask you, what was your initial, coming from Virginia, and then, I mean, obviously you kind of cut your teeth in Miami, so you kind of understood the world a lot better. Mm-hmm. But then getting into Colombia, was there any challenges of working in such like a volatile environment, or like what was that adjustment to living and working in Colombia versus Miami?
Well, because Javier had already been there 3 years, he had already earned the trust and respect of. We worked with a very elite unit of Colombian National Police officers, mm-hmm. the Dahin unit. So we ran a lot of the wire. Well, we didn't run them; they ran the wire rooms, but we paid for everything. We're the rich Americans coming in with assets and stuff. So because
this agency legitimately wanted to end the narcotics trade in Colombia.
These guys did.
They really did.
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, you talk about.
Because you hear about the corruption in law enforcement down there and politics, and I kind of have some questions about the politics side of things too. But it's interesting to see that you have this sect of law enforcement that's like, no, we really do want to remove these guys.
Yep. I mean, it was making their country. It was a narco economy. It was narco democracy, if that's a democracy. I don't think it is, but you know what I mean, the terminology. But because Javier had already earned their respect.
Narco dictatorship.
Yeah, pretty much. That's what Pablo wanted.
Right.
The guy offered to pay off their national debt 2 different times, billions of dollars, and he was going to pay it off. But he was going to buy the country. That's what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
So because Javier, I was his partner, I was accepted immediately, but I still had to earn their respect. Yeah. So that's true in anything. I mean, when you transferred units, people didn't trust you when you first went to the new unit, did they?
No, of course not.
You're the
new guy. You're the new guy all over again, no matter how long you've been in. Yeah, of course.
Yep. You got to pay your dues.
Yeah.
So that gave me a year to earn their respect, and then when Pablo did escape in June '92. The head of the Colombian National Police and the president of Colombia called the ambassador, the head of the Colombian National Police called our boss and said, "We want Pena and Murphy with us tomorrow in Medellin. We're reforming this thing called the bloque de búsqueda, the search block. And so we didn't know about it till the next morning. We showed up at the embassy, and we turned right around, went home, packed our bags, and for the next 18 months, we worked and lived in Medellin with the Colombian National Police.
Where'd your wife go?
Stayed in Bogota.
Wow.
Tough girl. I'm not kidding you.
Wow. Was she ever in danger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's a gringa. You know, she doesn't look Hispanic.
But I mean, was she in danger because she was your wife, or just because she was just white?
A couple of times.
They know who, like, you guys aren't undercover.
No.
They know who
we're
you
declared.
are. Yeah. You know exactly who you are.
And our G car, our government vehicles had diplomatic plates on them.
Yeah.
But the Colombian National Police gave us plates from cars that had been involved in wrecks or whatever. So we ran fake plates on our G cars, so we didn't stick out. Those dip plates really make you stick out. There's specific color. It is in the United States too.
Yeah, of course.
You see those, you know exactly that's a diplomat. We had diplomatic immunity. They gave us, the Colombian government gave us these little red books called carnets, and that's your pass. So you didn't have to carry your passport with you. If you hit a roadblock, you just show your carnet, and they couldn't search your car, and they'd wave you on through. A lot of times they would delay and ask you a million questions, but eventually you got through. But my wife and I were going home from work one night. I'd been in the embassy. I had a suit on. She was the community liaison officer at the embassy, which means she planned all the parties. And she controlled the tennis courts at the ambassador's residence. That was power.
That's power.
So we're on our way home, and I took some back streets because Bogota is a city of 8 million people, and they built the roads for like 1 million.
Yeah.
So it was horrible. And we're taking back streets, and I go by this military base, and my G car is a full-size Ford Bronco, the old big Ford Broncos, big West Coast mirrors.
Beautiful.
Had cattle racks on the front and the back, steel-plated, armor, bulletproof windows. I mean, the thing must probably weigh.
I think they reproduced that in the show too, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and it's manual transmission. So I'm running down through there about 40 miles an hour, and this little car pulls out in front of me. I lay it on the horn. Well, it's like an unwritten rule in Colombia. If somebody pulls out in front of you, or if you're sitting at a light and it turns green, everybody blows their horn.
Everybody's honking the horn. Yeah.
So, and if I'd hit these guys, I'd have killed them. I mean, there was 3 guys in the little car. So, I'm probably had a few choice words to say as I go around, and eventually we go up, and it's 2 lanes going the same direction, a median, and then 2 lanes going the opposite direction. So I'm starting to gear down because we're coming to a red light, and all of a sudden this little car whips in front of me and blocks me. And so I stand up on the brakes, and I stopped. I'm not kidding you, maybe 2 inches from them. With those cattle racks, I'd have turned that car right over and driven right over top of them. So 3 guys get out, and it's the 3 guys I blew the horn at, and they're mad. So they're coming over, and they want me to get out and fight. And they've got jackets on, but when they're bouncing around, I could see pistols in their waistbands. I'm a member of the search block in Medellin. I got a lot of enemies. All the sicarios in the Medellin cartel would like to kill me. I don't know who these guys are.
Right.
So I pull out my my Colombian National Police identification card, and I'm telling them, soy con la policía de Colombia, get the hell away from my car and all that. And so they pull out their military IDs, and they're like, yeah, we got one of those too. Get out, come on, get out. And we're sitting there, and I got on the radio, and I'm trying to call the embassy, post 1, where the Marine, it's where the Marine cars are in the embassy. Nobody's answering the radio. Finally, we had radios in our apartments. So one of the other agents' wives come up on the radio, and she's like, hey, Steve, is everything okay? I'm like, no, call post 1. We had roving patrols of former Colombian police officers that would go around and check our addresses. And I said, I need post 1 to send me a roving patrol out here. I got 3 guys with guns. Okay, I'll call them. I'm still, to this day, I'm waiting on that roving patrol to arrive. So we're sitting there for like 10 or 15 minutes, and traffic's backing up. People are blowing the horns and everything.
And they're staying there.
Yeah. So my wife, and these weren't real big guys. So finally my wife looks at me, and she said, if you can take those 2, I'll kick his ass. And I'm thinking, that's my girl. But, last thing I want to do is open that door and put her in danger.
No, yeah.
So.
Especially when guns are involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So finally my boss comes up on the radio, and he asked me what's going on. I told him, and he said, all right, he said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. He said, do you want me to bring Margarita? And that was a code for a mini Uzi machine gun. I said, yeah, bring Margarita. So he gets out there and he says, "Okay, I'm here. I see where you are. I'm going to walk up on the left side. I'll flank him from this angle. We'll have him in a crossfire." He said, "Give me like 3 minutes and I'll be in position. Then you come out when you're ready." And so I'm ready. I'm starting to open the door, and here comes a Colombian National Police motorcycle patrol with like 8 motorcycles, 2 guys on each bike. Man, I laid on that horn, and they're all looking as they're going by, and then they realize that traffic's blocked and the car's sideways in the road, so they circle around and come back. At least 3 guys, they run over to the head of the patrol as a sergeant. And, I'm sure they're telling him all the bad things I've done in my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
And so I finally get out of the car and I tuck my 9mm in my back of my waistband and go walking over. And this sergeant comes over and he starts blasting me. He starts just dogging me out. And I was like, hold on just a second here. I said, this is my car. That's their car. Who do you think's blocking? I'm not blocking them,
Yeah.
And I said, by the way, they all have guns. Well, boy, when I said that, all the guys, the long guns from the Colombian National Police come out, and the guys, whoa, yeah, well, we're Colombian military, and the sergeant, he comes over and starts saying something to me again about being disrespectful of his country, and so I whipped out my Colombian National Police ID card, and it was signed by General Montenegro. And they are extremely rank conscious. If you outrank somebody, you get all the respect in the world. And so I'm showing him, I said, you got a problem? Let's call General Montenegro. I got his home number. Do you? And I did. This is a guy we dealt with all the time. And the sergeant's like, oh, lo siento, señor, no quiero problemas. I'm sorry, I don't want any problems. And I said, who are these guys? And he said, well, they're with the military. And so I pulled out my Colombian military card.
Yeah.
And I said, if you got a problem, let's call this General Jaramillo, whatever his name was. I don't remember what it was now. And when they saw that, they're like, oh, senor, no, please don't, because they knew what was going to happen to them.
Right.
So long story short, we ended up going home. But that was just one of several times where my wife was in a dangerous situation. And you know what? Never complained, not a single time. Just tough girl, boy. 40 years later, I still like this girl.
Yeah. At that time, did he own the military? Did Pablo? Did he have influence in the military?
He did in certain parts. So up in Antioquia,
Part of the cartel.
Yeah,
yeah.
So up around Medellin, that's they call it a department. We call it a state. Antioquia was the state where Medellin was. He had total control up there. Police, military,
Wow.
government officials, judges, mayors, everybody.
So going back, how you're in Miami? Was he already running things? During that time?
He started, I'm going to say early 80s. It might have been the late 70s. He started off as a petty criminal, stealing hubcaps. And
so that's kind of where I'm getting, like, how did he, from your investigation, your experience, like, how did he go from a nobody, really a nobody,
mm-hmm.
to who what he built?
There was a guy named Restrepo who was a small-time cocaine dealer. And cocaine wasn't big back then. It was more marijuana. And so, the story is that Restrepo needed help moving 17 kilos of coke, 13 kilos, something like that. And somehow got Pablo to come with him as muscle or whatever. And Pablo realized how much money he could make. So he killed Restrepo, took over his business. And, what that did is there was already a level of violence. Colombia is a very violent country. It's a beautiful country, and I don't mean to sound negative about everything I say about it, but there's even a period of their history called La Violencia, the violent time. And that's where these roving bands of men would break into houses and use machetes to murder the men in those houses. And Pablo and his brother, if you believe, his brother wrote a book, Roberto Escobar. His brother's an idiot. But he even talks about when they were little that these people would break into their house looking for their dad. He wasn't there.
Yeah.
So given that level of violence, when Pablo killed Restrepo, it actually kind of introduced a level of violence that they really weren't used to in the drug trade. It was already violent, but it just continued to grow.
Mm-hmm. So
Pablo had this thing where he had ambition. I hate to give this guy credit for anything. But he had ambition.
I look at it. I look at any evil person, right? Like you study Hitler. Like the man was evil,
mm-hmm.
but at some level, not at some level, you have to. I don't know what I guess I'm looking for the word, because I don't want to say admire. You don't want to, I want to say, but you have to admit,
Yeah.
the man was intelligent, and to be able to pull off what he pulled off, there is a level of, you know, it's evilness, but there is a level of, you know, you take that same trait and turn it to good, and you would do amazing things, you know, but he didn't, because he's an evil human being. But
well, they know how to manipulate others.
Right. And like so like, you know, you gotta look like, well, what levers is he pulling to be able to pull off these things? Because if you don't understand that, how are you going to fight him?
Well, Pablo, he really introduced a level of violence that they weren't used to.
So it was fear.
Exactly. Intimidation and fear.
Yeah.
So he would come to you and he would say, "Hey, Nick, I need you to do whatever." Mm-hmm. And you're like, "Get out of here. I don't want anything to do with that." Well, okay. So then he goes and kills your wife, goes and kills your kids, kills your parents, kills your family dog, and then kills you. And he leaves the evidence out so everybody can see it. Sends a message.
If you say no, this is what's going to happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So in reality, Pablo was known to smoke weed every day of his life. So he was stoned most of the time. It's just he had no remorse, no guilt feelings, no compunction to kill you, to torture you, to, you know, I mean, your whole family, wipe out your whole family.
Didn't care. The
brains of the organization was his cousin, Gustavo Gaviria. So that's the guy we wanted. You know, we actually found him, which was very unusual, by himself in a house, which is really unusual. So they surround the house, the Columbia National Police, and we go out and we are, quite honestly, we're going to kidnap Gustavo, bring him back to the United States, because he knew everything. And this was back when the courts didn't really care how you got into the jurisdictional venue, just that you were in the venue. So it was a different time. Couldn't do it now. But, you know, when they surrounded the house and they called out on the bullhorns for him to come out with his hands up, he came out with a machine gun and started shooting. So we were not allowed to arrest him.
Oh.
He died that day.
How unfortunate.
He died of lead poisoning. But and
very hazardous to your health.
Yeah, and we kind of say it tongue in cheek now, but really we did want him alive.
Of course, because you can get so much more.
He knew everything, and he was the one that compartmentalized everything.
More than likely, that's the reason why he did what he did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you know, if like, I can't go with these people alive.
And he was loyal to his cousin Pablo. Yeah. It was outrageous what was going on. So
at this point, this guy dies of lead poisoning, and then where is the? And he's already escaped.
No, this is before he surrendered.
This is before okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So Pablo, when he surrenders, now this is my first week in the embassy, and it was like a Thursday. And I like to joke around that, hey, well, Pablo heard Murphy's in the country, might as well give up because I'm going to get him, which is a joke. Sorry, a bad joke, but a joke. But I thought, wow, this is great. But when I saw in the embassy was despair and dejection, and people were pissed off, and I'm thinking, how can you be mad that Pablo's in prison? You're like, Murphy, you don't understand. You know, you're new down here. You don't know what we've gone through. You don't know how many of our friends have been murdered in this investigation trying to capture Pablo. You know, you don't understand what the plea agreement was, what this prison, we don't know, but we're hearing it's pretty much a joke. And so I, smart to keep my mouth shut. And
this is there's already been a DEA agent that was killed at this point, right?
There had been two DEA pilots who were in a hotel in Barranquilla or Cartagena. I think it was Barranquilla. And they came and kidnapped them, and they took them out and were going to assassinate them, and they were able to escape. They were wounded in the escape, but they were able to get away. They're still alive today, believe it or not. Oh. That's the only ones I'm aware of. I can't think of any that have been killed down there before then. I know there's been one killed since then that was kind of off duty, and it was a robbery several years ago.
So not connected.
Right.
Okay.
But
because that's a big ballsy move to try to kill a DEA agent, right?
It is, because, and that's one of the, when Javier and I speak, we try to do a Q&A at the end of every, whether it's a theater or a college or a corporate event, whatever. And one of the most frequently asked questions we get is, I'm English Irish heritage. I'm about as white as you get. I don't blend in a Hispanic country, and Javier's Tex-Mex. He doesn't blend in much better than I do. How did you guys survive? Well, first and foremost, the good Lord kept us alive. That's what I believe.
Yeah, you're not invincible,
right? Right. But remember Enrique Camarena was the DEA agent who was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in Mexico back in the early '80s. Kiki, during his torture, died twice. He ended up dying 3 times, and they had a doctor in there that would shoot adrenaline in his heart, was bringing him back to life so they could torture him some more. Because of that, all the drug traffickers have seen what the response was of the U.S. government, and the government actually shut down the border between Mexico and the U.S. I think it was just for a few hours because the Mexicans were just trying to throw out a scapegoat. Oh, yeah, this is the guy that did it. There you go. And it wasn't.
Right.
So if you think about why drug dealers are in business to start with, it's all about the money.
Right.
The money, the power, the greed, the ego. If the border is closed, because when they close it, they get serious about it. I mean, look at COVID. We got serious there for a little while, didn't we? So they can't make any money. I mean, unfortunately, we are the largest consumer nation in the world when it comes to illegal narcotics. That's a great reputation to have here in the United States, isn't it? Which is a whole other topic that I like to get on my soapbox on, especially when I'm on Fox or Newsmax. But so we think that had a lot to do with it. We were younger. We got some extra training to go down overseas. This elite unit we worked with, when the bullets started flying, they wouldn't run off and leave you. They stood there and fought. But they knew we wouldn't run off and leave them either.
That's amazing.
But it's God's grace.
I've been abandoned a couple times by my surrogate force.
Oh,
in a firefight. I look around, they're all gone. I'm like, shit.
That's I can't imagine. Fortunately, I've never experienced that.
Because they do portray that that law enforcement unit as very elite and loyal.
They were
like very, and so I with the corruption, I always question that. I always question were they really, or were they just playing the part?
That was. So the only Colombians I knew before I moved to Colombia were the ones I'd put in jail in South Florida. Right. And as wrong as it is to stereotype anybody, I stereotype the whole country.
Well, I mean, it's your only point of reference.
Mm-hmm. So we get down there, and I'm talking to Javier and Gary about it and the other agents as you get to know them. And they're like, no, we work with an elite unit. There is corruption in this country, but the people we work with are not. Yeah. And the whole time we were in Medellin, there were 3 very low-ranking police officers that got caught on wiretaps. I mean, everybody knew we were running wiretaps. The press knew it, and they got caught. Three guys got caught making phone calls when we were getting ready to go out on ops, and they're in prison. But it was extremely dangerous for the Colombian National Police. There was one operation where we're going out on the old Huey gunships with the 30 cows in the doorway, and learned that you could put 8 combat-ready troops. That's all the weight a Huey will carry. And we're going on these ops and you're getting shot at, and it was very exciting. I know that sounds stupid to most people.
I get it.
Yeah, you would. But people say, wasn't I scared? Hell, I was scared every time we went out. Every time I've been shot at, I was scared.
Yeah.
But, and I don't think I have this ability now, but I think that God had given me the ability to continue to think logically under critical circumstances, because our initial reaction when you're being shot at is to run. Mm-hmm. Well, when you run, you give up your cover, right? And you don't know if you're running in the right direction. You're not real sure where the bullets are coming from initially. That's something you got to figure out. So he had that ability. He gave me the ability back then that I could do that. But nowadays I don't know that I have. I'm an old man now.
Right.
Middle-aged man. Let me go with middle-aged, not old.
So at this point when he escapes, how strong is the Medellin cartel? Like, how strong is he?
That 1 year, that gave him the opportunity to rebuild his coffers, to rebuild his organization, to rebuild his bank accounts, rebuild his power base.
Wow.
So what he did, and I mean, just think about this. Before.
So he wasn't that wounded?
No. He regained power for that 1 year. And if you think about it, at one point he had as many as 500 sicarios protecting him. Who's protecting him while he's in prison? The government of Colombia. I mean, again, you hate to give the guy credit for anything, but that's a pretty slick move.
Yeah.
They let him, and here's the plea agreement. They let him build his own prison. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, you know, listen, I don't want the taxpayers of Colombia to have to bear this financial burden, so I'll pay for it. All the guards on the prison, he paid the payroll. Who do you think they're loyal to?
Right.
So
it was the government that had the outer perimeter.
The government was not allowed to come within 2 miles of the perimeter of the prison. There was a 2-mile DMZ.
So there was no prison.
It was a joke.
He was just at his house.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
He had a nightclub in the prison. When you got on the back side of the prison, they're building these cabanas and chalets on the hillside, and it's very mountainous there. Because he had plans for that place. He said he only had to do 5 years, and that probably would have been less.
Yeah.
In exchange for that, he got absolved of every crime he ever committed in his life, including mass murder.
Up to that point.
Everything. Yeah. And there were no stipulations to take any of his assets. Here's a guy worth as much as $30 billion.
In the 80s.
Yeah. $30 billion.
Wow.
It's just outrageous. I mean, he handpicked his fellow prisoners. There's only 14 of them, counting Pablo. Of course, you know, they're the most loyal people.
Right.
He had that 2-mile demilitarized zone where nobody could go in. His sicarios went down in the road leading up to the prison. They went and spoke to every family on that road. And this is country area. Told them, if you see an unusual person or you see an unusual vehicle, a phone call will result in a cash payment. Mm-hmm. Well, these are poor people. They're campesinos. So sure, they're going to cooperate, because if they didn't, the result.
Why did the government agree to this?
This deal was arranged by the Attorney General, a guy named Gustavo de Grief. Gustavo was educated in the United States, spoke fluent English. He was actually an impressive man, but in Colombia, the Attorney General is not appointed by the president like here in the United States. He's actually elected, so he's autonomous. Right. So there was no expectation of him to cooperate with the president. You would think that they would, but they really didn't see eye to eye on that.
But he could operate in what he thought the best interest of the country was.
And here's a fact that it's not publicized very much. We do, because when we do our presentations, we tell the truth. We don't fabricate any stories. We tell the true story.
Well, you don't work for the federal government anymore.
So the president of Colombia ran on the platform of stopping the violence from the drug traffickers.
Okay.
For that 1 year that Pablo was in prison, the bombings actually stopped. I mean, there were bombings. There was one on 15th Street in the northern part of the city in Bogota. And Javier and I, we responded to the call after we heard about it. And Pablo had sent a car bomb off in front of this shopping mall, and the whole front of this mall was glass.
I remember this.
So we get down there. You see the black smoke rising. Traffic stops, so we had to get out and walk on foot. The closer you get, you start hearing the sounds associated with tragedy. Start seeing body parts laying on the street. You go in and you see the iconic photographs of the policemen and the firemen carrying lifeless bodies with children.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of things in my life that I've been involved with that have stuck with me. That one.
That was a pretty gnarly event. Yeah.
And you know what that was about? Across the street was a drugstore that was owned by the Cali cartel. Pablo was trying to get at them. So he killed all these innocent people, these children that were there getting books and school supplies to go to school. That's the heinousness of this guy. This is a guy that initially Javier and I used to attribute about 10 to 15, maybe 20,000 murders to Pablo Escobar. One of his last remaining sicarios, a guy that was known as Popeye, he died a few years ago of cancer. He came out, he had his own book, he had his own Netflix show. He was doing better than we were.
Make that make sense.
Oh my gosh, it's just amazing. But so we're going to film a new show. I forget which one it was, but we're up in Vancouver, BC with the producers, and we're starting to plot out the new show and everything. And they're talking about who we thought they should interview. And so one of the producers threw out Popeye. And Javier, we're both agreeing that, no, that guy is a murderer. He's a sicario. He's a legitimate sicario. And, don't talk to him. We don't want to be on the same show with him. Okay, we won't do it. Well, as soon as we left Vancouver, they called Popeye. Went down to Colombia, met him, interviewed him. He's on the same show we are. And he says, you know, the gringos, they say 15,000 murders that Pablo's responsible for. It's more like 50,000.
Why the disparity in numbers?
Just because all the stuff that was going on that we didn't know about.
Wow.
You know, Popeye on this show, his real name is John Jairo Vasquez Velasquez. So Popeye on the show admits to committing as many as 300 murders himself. He also admits to arranging the murders of as many as 3,000 people himself. He had tattoos on his arms, like across the bottom of his arm. This is when he's doing his TV show and everything. El Jefe de Cartel, the cartel boss. I saw one picture online. He's standing next to two young Colombian police officers in uniform, got his arm around him holding this up. This is a guy that used to kill police officers. I was shocked.
How is he free?
Colombian law. He's not free now. He's dead.
But I mean, how was he? How did he?
He did his time.
Killed 300 people.
So, you know, we have the death penalty in our country, and I'm pro-death penalty.
Mm-hmm. Some people just need to go away.
Yeah. In Colombia and most parts of the world, the maximum sentence is 30 years. So, like when we extradite drug traffickers from Colombia, part of that agreement is their sentence can be no more than 30 years.
What?
Yep. It's part of the agreement. I know it's heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, ridiculous, whatever you want to call it.
So what happened in that year? What happened at that year where he, you guys raided that prison and then he escaped?
Well, what he's doing is he's told his whole organization, look, I have fronted myself out in the media. The whole country knows who I am. I've destroyed my reputation. Everybody knows I'm a drug trafficker now. So in exchange for that, you either give me half the load that you're shipping out in cocaine, I get the money, or a minimum of a $400,000 tax. Mm-hmm. So that's how he's rebuilding his financial base. After almost a year, his sicarios they're extremely violent. I mean, they'll kill you in a heartbeat. There's no question about it whatsoever, just cold-blooded. Mm-hmm. But probably not the smartest people in the world. So they found a stash of money in a cave, and it was millions of dollars that had been shrink-wrapped. I've still got a copy of the original report that I sent to Washington. Now everybody seems to think it was about $10 million. The original report was $23 million. The plastic, the seal had released, and now you got moisture and air and bugs coming in there. And so this money is actually rotting away. Now that doesn't happen overnight. That takes months and months and months. Yeah. So the sicarios, they brought all that back to Pablo, and they took it up in the prison. They said, hey, this belongs to Kiko Moncada and Fernando Galeano. Now, Kiko, those are two of Pablo's lieutenants. Pablo and Kiko grew up as childhood friends. This is one of his best friends, a guy he trusts implicitly. So Pablo sends out word to Kiko and Fernando, hey, come on up to prison. No need to bring your protection detail. We're just going to have a cookout, and we're going to talk about business a little bit and just have a good time. We'll have some hookers come up, things like that. That was what's going on in the prison. So they show up without their bodyguards. Well, when they come walking in, we can learn this from an informant, how we know. When they came walking in, Kiko saw that money laying there. I mean, you can imagine how big a pile $23 million is. It's not like a checkbook laying on the table. And he looks at that, and he looks at Pablo, and he said he saw in Pablo's face, he's like, Pablo, I don't know what you think's going on here, but it's not what you think. That's money that we had literally forgotten about. How do you forget about $23 million? That just tells you how much money's in this business, right?
Kidding, right?
So he's trying to explain everything, and Pablo's not having any of it. In the background, the sicarios are egging Pablo on, kill him, Pablo, kill him. They're left, they're trying to screw you over. Look what you're going through and what they're going. They're free. They get to sleep in their beds every night and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, it escalates to the point where Pablo takes a club and beats his childhood friend to death, Kiko Moncada. Of course, the sicarios, they jump on Fernando Galeano. They beat him to death. Parts of the bodies were sent to the families asking for money, or not asking, demanding monies and different things like that. The bodies were never found. I guess the most prevailing rumor is that they chopped them up into pieces, and they, as gross as this sounds, baked it up into a human-type stew and then fed it to the dogs. Is that true or not? I don't know. But the bodies were never found.
It's on par with their MO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we found out about it, you know, we went to our boss and went to the ambassador and said, you know, you got to do something about this. So the ambassador goes to the president of Colombia and says, here's what's going on. You got to do something. If you don't do something, this is probably going to leak out to the press. So they came up with a plan for the president was going to send some military guys up to the prison, and their ruse was to tell Pablo, listen, we're going to refortify your prison to make it safer for you because, you know, we know that the Cali cartel is trying to get to you. They planned one operation to raid the prison, and the helicopters crashed and all that stuff. That's another story. And so in the meantime, we're temporarily going to put you in La Picota, which is a real South American prison in Bogota. I mean, it's nasty.
Yeah.
Well, Pablo's a little smarter than that. So they had sent an Army colonel and the assistant justice minister, this guy named Mendoza, who's like 25 years old, to deliver this message to Pablo. Well, when they get to the gate, you know, the justice minister looks over at the colonel and says, all right, Colonel, go give him the message. Colonel says, I ain't going up there. You go up there. President said for you to go tell him.
Yeah.
So the military stayed out, and well, here goes this naive, you know, a deputy justice minister goes up there.
And you guys are not there at this time?
No.
Okay.
And we didn't even know about this part until after the fact. So he goes up there. Well, you know, they immediately take him hostage, and the Sicarios are wanting to kill him, and Pablo's trying to talk to him. Pablo said, no, you get the president on the phone. I want to talk to him. Well, in the past, the president would take Pablo's phone calls. The Congress members would take his phone calls. Of course, the media would take his calls because we know how the media will sensationalize anything. Now nobody's picking up the phone in the presidential palace. They refuse to talk to Pablo. Well, this kind of goes on for an hour or two.
Which makes him more nervous, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can imagine. Plus, he's probably smoking weed, and
So
who knows
he's
what else he's doing.
paranoid and thinking something's going to happen.
And you got all these Sicarios going, kill him, Pablo, kill him, you know. And I mean, that just really messes with your psyche. Mm-hmm. So they send up the police. And, no, they actually sent up an elite unit, La Copas. You know what? I don't remember if they were police or military. I think they were police. Anyway, they go in and they launch an operation. Big gun battle. Not a single good guy is hurt. Believe it or not, Mendoza is rescued, and he's still alive today.
Wow.
The only people that were injured were a bunch of the guards, the prison guards, because the cops were shooting them because they were shooting back at them. Because you know where their loyalty is.
Of course.
But somehow Pablo walks out the backside of that prison. Now recently, and I'm talking in the last several months, Javier was doing an interview with Univision or Telemundo. I think it was Univision, and all in Spanish. And they showed him some pictures of Pablo leaving the prison. And of course, we're interested in that. And Javier's asking, where in the world these come from? Well, there was a photographer in Colombia that when all this was going down, his agency said, go up there and find out what's going on. Well, he got up there, he saw all the media there, and he thought, well, what could I do different? So he goes around to the back of the prison. You know, he has to go through the woods and the mountains. He said his story was that when he came around there, here comes Pablo and some of his inmates walking out. They got guns. And he said he laid his camera down on the ground and lays his hand. He said, I'm sorry, Pablo, I'm sorry. I was told to come and find out what's going on. That's all I'm doing here. And he said, Escobar looked at him and says, get your camera, take your pictures. You're looking at a dead man walking. And so we've got 3 of those pictures that they've given us that we now show in our presentation. And it's Pablo and some of his henchmen just walking out through the woods. That's, you know, that night, the next day is when Javier and I moved up to Medellin. First thing we did was go to the prison. We landed at the police base, and then they took us by helicopter over to the prison so we could see what was going on. Back then, I used to carry a camera everywhere I went. Sometimes I'd have a video camera with me, but this time I had an old little pocket 35mm. It was actually Connie's camera that I'd kind of snitched from her. And took all the pictures of the prison and everything. And then, so we go back down to the base. We start living there. We're living in the barracks, no hot water. You know, these are supposed to be private rooms. There were times when we had 4 sets of bunk beds, 8 guys staying in one room that was built for one person, and you're sharing a bathroom with the room adjacent. So you got 16 guys trying to get to the toilet in there or the shower. You know, wasn't a lot of fun. And mosquitoes and all that stuff. It's hot, no air conditioning, all that kind of stuff. Food was rice and potatoes 3 times a day. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you might get a piece of chicken. Occasionally you might get a steak, but let me tell you, it was like shoe leather. Yeah. It wasn't the steaks that we're used to. A few weeks into this, we got a call to come back to the embassy, And we go up, and there's a group of American military guys there, and there was a colonel named Jerry Boykin. He was in charge. Introduced us to him. We said, who are these guys? Well, these guys represent SEAL Team 6. I'm like, whoa, I've heard of you guys. I was impressed. Javier, not so much. Then a couple of days go by, and some more guys show up, and said, come up, Murph, Javier and Murph come up. We want to introduce these guys. It was Delta. I'm like, oh, my gosh. So for 18 months, we had, Deb Grew, and we had Delta with us.
Why the government interest?
Just to do what we could do to capture this guy, to capture Pablo Escobar. He was the world's most wanted criminal.
Who was president at the time?
This was in 93. I don't remember.
That was George Bush Sr.?
I'm thinking it was.
Or right towards the end of his
time? If I say I'm not sure, I'm telling an accuracy. So they came up to Medellin with us and moved in. Well, they inflated their ranks because, Colombian police are a very rank conscious organization. So if you told them, well, this guy's a corporal, this guy's a sergeant, whatever, they wouldn't get any respect. So, we're captains and things like that. Tony Thomas, if you ever knew Tony, was a captain back then. He was with us. Ignacio Balderas out of Bragg. I don't know if you ever met him, but, being command sergeant major. I mean, just some Jack Alvarez, some guys that just, James Sutterth, guys that you just stayed in touch with.
Yeah.
I get chill bumps talking about them because I think they are the studs of the world.
Yeah.
They were, our rules of engagement were from the ambassador, we could not leave the police base. Well, how do you do your job if you're sitting back in the safe zone, right? It made no sense whatsoever. I'm looking at these guys, and, Jerry Boykin got his first star, got his first general star while he was there in country. He ended up in Mogadishu, was wounded over there. So he ended up retiring as a 3-star. I've stayed in touch with him over the years. I have the utmost respect for General Boykin. He's a man among men. Javier and I talked about it, and we said, we've got these orders from the ambassador. They're not laws. Military follows orders. We kind of looked at them as suggestions, strong suggestions, and we continue to go out on ops every day.
I mean, technically, you do work for the DEA.
Yeah, and the ambassador, it's like the president. He's the president's representative, so you're supposed to do what he says.
There's it's like mom and dad kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing, though. Everything we did, we reported. There were times we might write 10, 12, 14 teletypes a day.
Yeah.
Because we're doing so many ops and so much information coming in. And it's all going to our boss, so he knew what we were doing. How else were we getting this information?
Right.
It's going through the ambassador, it's going through the CIA, the station chief there, and it's going to headquarters. So everybody knew what we were doing. Well, towards the end, and we had a wire intercept room there in the base. The agency decided they wanted a wire intercept room. So the Colonel Hugo Martinez, he was our boss up there. He's the man in charge of the 600-man force whose sole responsibility is to find, capture, or kill Pablo Escobar. No other responsibilities. So he authorizes the agency to put their wire room in. They get it all set up. It's right next to ours. And the way they sold it to him, was that they would provide him with crime-related information associated with Colombia. Well, when the colonel said, hey, where's my information? Well, we haven't intercepted anything yet that would fit that criteria. So he calls BS on it.
Yeah.
So he ends up kicking them out. The day that Pablo was killed, so this is December 2nd, 1993, I was in the room with all the operators. And you know how it is. You're in a foreign country. It's nice to just have some English speakers to, we talk sports, we talk food, families, all that kind of stuff. And I'm standing there talking to him, and I saw the colonel's executive staff running across the quad to his office. And those guys never run. So I said, well, hey, guys, something's going on. I'll be back. So I go over to the colonel's office, and we had the kind of relationship where they had a hard time saying my name, Steve. So it came out as Steak, or Stick was my street name. And he's like, Steak, come on in. So and he's on the walkie-talkie, and he's talking to Lieutenant Hugo Martinez, his son. Lieutenant Martinez is the guy who taught himself to use radio directional finding equipment He's the guy that found Pablo Escobar on December 2nd, 1993. So I'm in there with the lieutenant colonels and the majors, and we got, after 18 months, you get to be really close friends with these guys. And I'm whispering to one of the guys, and he's like, it looks like he got Pablo this time. Well, we've heard that before, so
right.
You're hoping, but you're not getting excited. Finally, the colonel tells his son, he's like, surround the building. We're loading up the troops. Don't let him get away. He said, whatever you do, don't let him get away. Well, this was our Daheen unit. They're not going to wait on anybody.
Right.
These are can-do guys. One of the things that the operators did, the U.S. operators did, was teach them raid tactics, breaching, use of det cord, use of hand grenades, all that kind of stuff. So they used det cord, blew the front door off of this row house. Made entry. It's a 3-story row house. They made their entry, and gun battle ensues. And of course, Pablo and this guy who used to have 500 Sicarios had 1 Sicario left. I mean, we had decimated his organization. So they're both killed that day. Well, back to the agency guy, he had come in that morning before the ops started going down, and he comes over to all of us gringos, and he's like, hey, guys, I got to tear the wire room down. Can you guys help me? I'm like, no, we're not going to help you. You haven't done anything but give us a hard time the whole time you've been here. And it wasn't quite worded like that, but the point was made.
Yeah.
And so he goes and then he comes back and he's like, well, have y'all got a car we can use? We don't have cars. We ride in the police trucks out here. And so he goes over to the colonel, and the colonel asks for help. And the colonel's like, get your shit and get out. They wanted nothing to do with him either. So this poor guy, he's going out renting a truck. He's trying to find boxes to box all his materials up in and everything. Well, as he is, and we wouldn't even help him carry it out. I mean, there was no love lost there. And he's loading the pickup as the operation goes down, and nobody's telling him what's going on. I'm not sure how. I'm going to guess the operators eventually told him.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because when it came back that Pablo was dead, I took off running to find a phone to call my boss back at the embassy, and it seemed like it took days to get him on the phone. I'm sure it's probably like 4 or 5 minutes, but we're loading up the troops. I'm wanting to get out there. And finally, my boss, I had to call the admin office and get an admin person to run to the boss's office to bring him into the admin's office to get on the phone because I couldn't get through any other line. And when he's the country attaché, when he picks up the phone, he says, they just killed Pablo. I'm like, yeah, that's why I'm calling you, and so he said, well, get your butt out there and get this, verified. Your job is to confirm that's Pablo. Because you've heard this before, and although everybody's exciting and you're thinking maybe this really is the time, you don't want to get your hopes up and have them dashed again. So I run to the barracks, grab my gear, come running out. Every vehicle in the base is gone. The only people there is the secretarial staff and the guards on the gates. And a police base in Colombia is like a military base here in the United States. It's got the inner and outer perimeters and the serpentine drives and all that. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even know where they are. I don't know the part of town. I don't have a vehicle. I can't even call a taxi to get me there. I don't know where they are. And, so all these things are going through your mind. And lo and behold, here comes Colonel Martinez with his protection detail, come driving back in. And he sees me out in the middle of the quad. He's like, Steve, what are you doing? I'm like, Colonel, I need a ride. Get your butt in the Jeep, So he'd come back to get his cameras. We get out there. The only cameras that worked were mine. Nobody else's cameras worked that day. So as long as I'm with the colonel, the Red Sea is partying anywhere we go.
Yeah.
Because he's a colonel. So we go in and we search, they show us all the 3-story row house. And then we're on the 3rd floor. I'm looking out the window and you can see Pablo's body is on the roof of a 2-story row house behind it. And that's where the Daheen guys are. And so I'm in the, I yell out at these guys and they're like, Steak. And they got nobody's shooting in the air, but they got their rifles up in the air. Yeah. And I'm snapping a few pictures and Colonel says, come on, we're going to go around and see the body. So we walk out, go all the way around the block, climb a ladder, get up on the roof. And I'm looking, and to me, it looks like Pablo. I've never seen him before except in pictures. Never saw him as a live person. I found out he'd been shot 3 times, once in the back of the leg, once in the butt cheek, and then a coup de grace right there in the ear. As I'm standing there, it's just been this massive firefight. You've got 600 Colombian police officers there. Next thing that shows up is several hundred Colombian military people and several thousand citizens coming to see what happened. You know, what was this gun battle all about? Because they know something's happening.
Yeah.
I'm standing on the roof, and I see this older lady and a younger lady show up, and they're just kind of like they're holding court out there. And one of the Dejeen majors comes over to me and says, "Hey, that's Pablo's mom and his sister." So I started watching them. The Sicario that Pablo had, when he was shot off that roof, he fell to the ground. So after a while of making a spectacle of themselves, the sister, who's extremely outspoken, you know, because Pablo's her brother and she can get away with anything she wants, she's like, "I want to see Pablo's body." And she starts elbowing her way over, and, you know, she goes over to where the Sicario, Lemon was his nickname, Limon, was laying on the ground. And she looks at him, she's like, "You idiots, that's not Pablo Escobar. You've killed you guys don't even know who Pablo Escobar is," you know, and she's just berating the cops. And they let her go on until she kind of ran out of breath, and they looked at her and said, "Look on the roof, bitch." So she doesn't get to go up on the roof. She has to wait till the body's brought off the roof. But when she saw the body and I saw the reaction of her and her mom, for me, that was 100% confirmation that was Pablo. For whatever reason that day, they wouldn't let us wear anything that looked police or official, so we always wore jeans and tennis shoes and either a polo shirt or a button-up shirt. For whatever reason, I had on a red polo shirt that day. It kind of stuck out. And so what we didn't want to happen, I'm the only gringo out there.
Yeah.
What we didn't want to happen is that the press show up and then make insinuation that the United States did this, but they're giving credit to the Colombian National Police. We wanted Colombia to have the credit, and rightfully earned. I'm not giving them anything. They've already done it themselves. So I went to one of the lieutenant colonels, and he said, "Yeah, let's get you back to the base." So they gave me a detail, and they escorted me back to the base. That evening, when everybody got back, we thought, you know what, let's lock down because we're going to have retaliatory attacks tonight. Quietest night I ever spent in Medellin.
Why do you think that was?
The whole organization was decimated. As silly as this sounds, it's the first time we completely dismantled a cocaine cartel. Usually you chop the head off the snake, more people step up. This one was decimated.
Why?
Well,
because of the way he ran business?
Well, there was a group also out there called Los Pepis. Now, Los Pepis is nothing more than a vigilante group. Murderers, every bit as bad as Pablo Escobar. And what they did is, we're operating within the confines of the law. Well, what they're doing is they're using Pablo's tactics against him. So any person that had any association with Escobar or the family or the organization, they were going out and murder them. It could be a dentist, a doctor, a lawyer, housemaids, whatever that might be.
They want a clean house.
Yeah. So they were blowing up things with dynamite. They were burning houses. There was one warehouse that contained, I forget, like 60 vintage cars that were all, melted. So initially, this was the interesting part. In Colombia, not here like in the United States, but in Colombia, they will publish pictures of dead bodies, the carnage. They put it in the press. And so when the pictures are coming out about...
I remember the Colombian newspaper articles popping up.
Yeah.
With the pictures and everything.
Yep.
In the 90s, yeah.
Well, public opinion was pro-government. Everybody felt like, hey, Pablo's getting a taste of his own medicine. This is fantastic. Well, then Los Pepis killed 2 attorneys, and one of them happened to have his 10-year-old kid with him. So they killed the kid too. Mm. And Los Pepis would, Pablo, when he would commit these atrocious acts, he would leave his calling card. One of them was a leaflet they had made called The Extraditables. We prefer a tomb in Colombia to a jail cell in the United States. So they would leave those around, taking credit. So Los Pepis, what they would do is when they would pull an act, they'd take a piece of cardboard and they'd send Pablo a message and sign it Los Pepis. So again, using his own tactics against him. Well, when the picture came out of that 10-year-old kid, that's when public opinion started turning against what Los Pepis was doing. The U.S. government, we didn't have Central Command back then. We didn't have MacDill Air Force, or MacDill at that time. We had Southern Command in Panama. So when those pictures came out, Washington lost their balls, and wanted to pull all the operators out. They wanted to pull Javier back to Medellin. They didn't want any government involvement, any U.S. government involvement in any of this stuff. Luckily, our ambassador was a retired naval commander, lieutenant commander, I think, who was a can-do man. Love the guy. He's big as a mountain. He's like 6'6", 6'7". Morris Busby's his name. And he stood up to Washington, he stood up to state, and he stood up to Southern Command in Panama. And they kept all our operators down there. Still wouldn't let them leave the base.
Yeah.
You know. And I just want to say this so I don't forget it. If we had put politics aside and let DevGru and Delta do their job, we honestly believe within the first 3 weeks, but certainly no more than 3 months, they would have found Pablo. But politics got in the way, so it took 18 months. How many more people were killed in 18 months versus 3 months?
How many lives could have been saved?
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And it's all about politics.
Just diplomatic bullshit.
Oh, thank God, Ambassador Busby was there because he kind of saved the day, or else we would have been out of the picture. So, having said all that, it was a great day for Colombia. People say, though, and because we do a Q&A, when we go to Europe, especially in England, they believe everything they see on TV. Mm-hmm. So they've seen Narcos. They believe all that. They believe Javier was passing classified information to Los Pepis. They believe that I was on a helicopter when we're pushing people out at 3,000 feet because they believe I got kidnapped. I never got kidnapped. They believe all that stuff. And they've seen the pictures that I took of Escobar. And there's one picture where I'm taking pictures of the Colombian police, and these are our buds, these are our comrades. And they're like, Steek, come, let's get your picture. So I'm standing behind Pablo, kind of holding him up on the shirt collar. And I might have a little bit of a shit-eating grin on my face. And they challenged me over it. They're like, you guys took an oath to protect human life and property, but here's a picture of you standing over a dead guy smiling. How do you explain that? And so I explained it. The reason we're smiling is we all knew everybody was safer in Colombia at the point that Pablo Escobar died. Yeah. Just because one man's dead. So then they say, well, did you think you really had any positive effect on drug trafficking? Because we all know we can still get cocaine anywhere we want to. And sadly, that's true. Yeah. Well, we did have a positive effect, lasted maybe 2 weeks, because we saw the Cali cartel step up. Then we took them out. And then the North Valley cartel stepped up. We took them out. Then this guy, Don Berna, who was running La Oficina de Envigado, he stepped up, which, by the way, he's doing 30 years in prison. He's due to get out here soon. It was the first time that a entire cocaine cartel had been completely destroyed. People say, well, what was the positive effect? Well, what we did is we looked at the murder rate in 92 and 93. I challenge your listeners, do your own research. Don't accept what I'm telling you as the truth. If you do, go check me out. Fact check me, please do. What you'll find out is in 1992 and 1993, Medellin, Colombia was the murder capital of the entire world. Believe it or not, more than Mogadishu, more than all the other stuff that was going on in the world. So what we did is we looked at the murder rate in Medellin prior to Pablo's death, and then we waited a couple months, checked it again. What we found, and what you'll find if you check it, is the murder rate in Medellin dropped by almost 80%. Now, people say, do I have any remorse or guilt feelings over that picture with Pablo's body? I didn't lose a minute's sleep over it. In my opinion, he got what he deserved that day.
I would say the scales are not even balanced.
No, they weren't.
Yeah.
They weren't. It's horrible.
I don't think there's really any winning. The majority of the world, especially America, the majority of America really has, and I was talking about this with Lou Velozzi on the short podcast we did up at the Corps Military Appreciation Weekend. The majority of Americans have no clue how evil the world is.
Right.
And the reality is you've got a small percentage of people that are evil, and you have a small percentage of people that are fighting that evil, and then the rest are at the mall or at Starbucks. And unfortunately, I don't think there's any winning, beating them completely. I think it's just about having the upper hand or being a little bit more in control of that evil versus them being in control. And I think that sometimes that power dynamic shifts. But at this point, you guys had the upper hand for a short amount of time. And unfortunately, evil's going to raise its head, and there's going to be another Steve and another Javier that's going to have to step in to fight that and to keep it at bay. But I don't think that there's ever beating it.
No, it's you know what it boils down to is the basic laws of economics: supply versus demand. If we could stop the demand in our country, the supply would dry up. But we've become so permissive in our country that anything goes.
Well, I want to talk about that here in a second. But
okay.
Going back, so he's dead. How long did you stay in Colombia afterwards?
So he was killed in December. My wife and I adopted our first daughter in October of 93. And then he was killed in December 93. So to give you a little timeline, I'm living in Medellin. I'm not even back home with my daughter, my new daughter. And then in May 94, we adopted our second daughter, who's actually from Medellin. And then in June 94, my wife and I transferred back to the States. We got stationed in Greensboro, North Carolina, which I didn't even know where Greensboro was. Loved the place, though.
I was going to say, you probably fit in really good.
I understood what everybody was saying there.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to point out about this whole operation is you know, this is our 9th year of traveling around the world. We're already booking events for next year, which will be our 10th year. I don't know how long this thing's going to go. I'm going to ride as long as I can, as long as the good Lord gives me health and people want to hear the true story. But what I don't want, and Javier's in a full agreement, we don't want to take credit for any of this. We want the credit to belong to the true heroes, and that's the Colombian National Police, because they took their country back from this piece of crap. Those guys, in one investigation in 18
Such
months.
a better story, too.
It is.
It's a better story.
And it's a human interest story in my book. But in that 18-month period while Pablo was a fugitive, 137 Colombian National Police officers were murdered in one investigation. 137 cops. Can you imagine what our country would do if 137 cops were killed? I mean, we shut everything down when one cop is hurt.
Oh, it would have been
it's
a reckoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, so anyway, that's my whole point. You can forget everything else I said. The one thing I asked you to remember is who the true heroes were, and that's the Colombian National Police.
Now, it was Colombian National Police, or was that elite unit?
Both.
They work together.
Yeah, they just have one police department for the whole country.
Okay. So going back, I'm really, and the reason why I'm going to ask this portion of the story, your perception on it, and I think it's before you got there, because of some of the things that have transpired over the decades in our own country. And I like to look at what happened in Colombia. I like to look at what happened in Venezuela, and I guess we're getting into the politics side of things, because you know the old saying, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it, right?
Thank you.
Yep. So I'm going back to his foray into politics, how that happened, how he did what he did. And this was before you guys got there, right?
Yes.
So
well, Javier was there. I wasn't.
Javier was there.
Yep.
So what was that looking like? Because they did paint him, or he painted himself, I guess, as this Robin Hood figure of Medellin, taking care of the people and giving his money to the people and doing all this sort of thing. But on one side, and then on the other hand, he's killing everybody.
Right.
So I've never had a very clear picture of that. Like, what, from your experience, or what Javier told you, or what you knew, how did that all transpire, and what was real? And how much it was just psychological operations on his part?
Well, Pablo had become so wealthy and so powerful. His ego was out of control. His greed was out of control, which is what we capitalize on in law enforcement, right? I mean, that's just makes them an easy target,
right?
Because they think they're smarter than everybody else.
And untouchable.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So he thought, well, since I'm a representative of the poor, you know, he and there's this Robin Hood myth that goes along with him, and I love to dispel that myth. He did go in and build housing for people who lived on the edge of a trash dump, literally on the edge of a trash dump. Whatever cardboard or pieces of wood, that was their housing. So he went in and built housing and let them live there. He built clinics. He built soccer fields. He gave away food. He gave away money. Those are all good things. But
I'm questioning why.
Yeah.
Because there's a bigger reason, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when his sicarios are being killed from protecting Pablo, where do you think he went to recruit new sicarios? Right back into that neighborhood. Now, if put yourself in the position of one of those people that you're living under those circumstances with your mom, your kid, and you're living on a trash dump, and now all of a sudden your mom has electricity and running water, a door with a lock on it that gives her some security.
This is terrorism.
Yeah. It's that's why I say
IRA pulled the same card forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Well, so when everybody says that Pablo's a Robin Hood, what we refer to him as a master manipulator, because he would go back into that community and say, he'd hug them, he'd kiss them. I mean, he really showed affection for them, but it was all for a reason. Hey, Pablo, I need like 100 people that are willing to come and kill for Pablo, that are willing to die for Pablo. And the sad thing is you might have 300 or 400 young people step up. And we're talking 13 to 19, 20, 21. Javier participated in the arrest of a 15-year-old sicario one time. He was in a club, got a tip that he was there. Get in there, they had to fight the kid to get him under control, had a gun in his waistband, brought him back, uneducated, all he knows is killing. He says, hey, Pablo put a bounty on Colombian police officers, $100. So every police officer I kill, I get $100. He said, last week I went out and in one day killed 3 police officers. I go to an address, I got $300. What'd you do with the money? Well, I'll give most of it to my mom, but I keep a little so I have nice shoes, some jeans, and my beer money. And then he says, I will continue to kill for Pablo. I will die for Pablo. I probably won't live past 20 or 21. And he was 15 years old. Had already killed several Colombian police officers. Just no compunction for life. I think most of the world doesn't.
He was creating his own breeding ground.
Yeah, exactly. And it just manifested itself.
Yeah.
I mean, you've probably seen this. Most other countries don't seem to value life the way we do.
This is very true.
We went to a funeral. We didn't go on this operation, and thank God we didn't, because 8 Colombian police officers drowned in this operation. They were geared up battle gear, and they went on these boats, and it was a rough river, and the boats tipped, and their vest and the ammo and everything they were carrying weighted them down. They drowned. So we go to this funeral, and they don't bomb bodies down there. They drain the body fluids, and they put cotton in the ears and in the nose, and then they put them in a casket, and there's a little glass window over the face so you can see who's in there. And the reaction I saw from these tough, death-defying cops that were still alive, they were just breaking down. They were falling on the floor crying, and I understand that. But when we finished, we all went to a little bar, and we're sitting there, and there was a sergeant that we worked with a lot, and I'm just in Spanish. I tell you this, I'm sorry for what happened to these guys. These are our friends. And there's a term in Colombia that's que pena. He's like, big deal. Shit happens. And that's exactly what they said to me, que pena. And so we drank beer and started laughing, and they never thought about it again. I'm sure it didn't leave their memories, obviously, but
right.
Where, we might be in mourning for several weeks, if not longer, especially 8 guys killed in one op. So you were saying a while ago that most Americans don't realize how good they have it. If I was king for a day, dictator for a day, whatever, I would require all Americans to go live in another country for a year and then come back and tell me what you think about the United States.
Be a different country.
Late in my career, the administrator promoted me up to the senior executive service, which for us is as high as you can go without, next step would be a presidential appointment. We had to be approved by the Attorney General. Mm-hmm. And she said, listen, I'm thinking about sending you back to Colombia. Would you go down and be we called it a regional director back then. And you'd be in charge of Colombia and a couple other countries down there. And I told her, I said, Michelle, I'm honored that you would consider me for that. If you're asking my opinion, I don't want to go back. As much as I love Colombia, living there made me appreciate living in the United States. And she was gracious enough not to make me go back. So I ended up in Washington.
I feel like you did your...
Yeah. Yeah.
So going back to the election process, how did he pull that off?
So what he did is he lives in Medellin or that surrounding area. He grew up in...
And that's a state?
Well, Medellin's a city, but it's in the state of Antioquia.
Okay.
And so he went to...
So that was really his state?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's home. He grew up in Rio Negro. It's out where the main airport is. And
so
everything.
He was running everything that he was doing in the world and that amount of cocaine out of that state of Colombia.
Well, I mean, he was traveling all around the world and throughout Colombia, but yeah, that was home base.
Wow.
So what he does is he goes to one of the congressmen and says, "Hey, I want to get in politics. I want to be your alternate." And he starts campaigning.
And that was just the state, right?
Yes, just for Antioquia.
Okay.
But you're a member of the Colombian Congress.
Okay.
So it'd be like our House of Representatives, or maybe even the Senate.
Right.
So I'm sure there's a lot of money paid off because the congressman said, "Okay, well, when he's the incumbent, he's reelected. Pablo comes in as his alternate. The next day, the congressman resigns for health reasons, which automatically bumps Pablo up to the congressman's position. Well, in Colombia, when you're a member of Congress, you're immune from the law. You can't be arrested. It's one of the perks.
And he knows this.
Yeah. So he's going in, he had aspirations of becoming president of Colombia. People thought that highly of him. I mean,
or he thought that highly of himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy's a mass murderer.
Yeah.
So one of the rules in Colombia is you cannot be a member of Congress if you have a criminal record. And if you remember, there was a period when M19 assaulted the Palace of Justice in Bogota. Mm-hmm. You probably remember seeing pictures. You see a APC or maybe a light armor tank breaking down a wall and military guys jumping behind walls and all that. Well, M19, they had been contracted by Pablo to go and destroy the evidence room in there because that's where all the evidence against Pablo was. And I mean, there was a lot of people killed. There were some Supreme Court justices were murdered there. Some people's bodies were never found. They did destroy a lot of evidence, but not all of it. So in open Congress, the Minister of Justice at that time was a guy named Rodrigo Lara Bonilla. Lara Bonilla's got a big set, I'm telling you. So he's got that. You've seen the iconic picture of Pablo getting a mug shot, and he's got a smile on his face, holding his jail number. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla unveils that in open Congress, calls Pablo out. And so, of course, Pablo's embarrassed. He gets up, storms out. Bad side was, a couple weeks later, 2 guys on a motorcycle assassinated Lara Bonilla as he's driving in his car. His bodyguard's driving. Mm-hmm. So he paid with his life. But that's what got Pablo out of politics. And then at that point, he declared war on his own country. Imagine that, declaring war on your own country. And he did it twice.
But this is when the facade kind of is broken.
Yeah. Yeah. This is when he became, he was already the world's first narco-terrorist, recognized as the first narco-terrorist. Then he became the world's most wanted fugitive. Even the show America's Most Wanted, they came down, and Javier and I took them to Medellin for a week to film. They did 1 episode only of the world's most wanted on Pablo Escobar.
Like, we got to get out of here.
Oh, there was a couple of times where we had massive protection from the Colombian National Police. We set up a roadblock in front of his finca Nápoles, Hacienda Nápoles. And the cops told us, you got 15 minutes because it'll take them 20 minutes to respond out here, the Sicarios. So they filmed doing roadblock stuff. And then we packed up and we shot back into the finca because that had become a Colombian National Police base. We went into the town. They said, you got 10 minutes. It wasn't a comfortable feeling.
Absolutely not. And you kind of briefly talked about it, but I'm curious to know, obviously the agency is involved. And at this point, if you do your research, you know that the agency was involved in drug trafficking for a lot of different reasons. Hence, one of the reasons why I believe that we have such a drug issue in America. So, did you know that at the time?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'd heard the things about what was going on in Central America between the Sandinistas, the Ali North thing, what's true, what's not true. Everybody's pointing a finger at everybody else.
Right.
I think we're always a little suspicious of the CIA. It's basically, though, and I got to tell you, I'm not an enemy of the CIA. I think overall that they do a pretty good job. They're not 100%. Nobody is.
Nobody is.
Right.
But this is an interesting conundrum to be in, because you have one organization fighting it, and then you have another organization fueling it.
Yeah.
I mean, make this make sense.
Well, we never saw that in Colombia. Was it going on? It may have been, but we never personally saw it. I will tell you, and the one thing that is true about the Narcos,
it got worse in the 80s, but
yeah,
it was worse in the 80s, I believe. But anyways, I was just curious from your work down there, was there any, to your knowledge, was there any agency involvement?
Not that I ever saw, not that even did I ever suspect. Now,
I imagine there would be something that you would have came across. You know what I mean? If there was at the time, I would imagine there would be.
They tick me off a lot of times. So we used to go out on patrols with the Columbia National Police, and they'd take you out. They might take 3 or 4 or 5 helicopters and drop us all off, and we'd go patrol the mountains for a day looking for drug labs, whatever we could find. And they came to me one time and they said, "Listen, we've got this new radio system. We'd like for you to take it with you out in the mountains there, and here's your freaks and frequencies and all that stuff." And to this day, nobody has ever answered me on that radio. That thing weighed 40 pounds, and I'm humping that thing in the mountains. I'm thinking, after you get back, it's like, I threw it at him. I said, don't ask me to ever do anything again for you. And I'm thinking, like, let's see how far we can push Murph. Is he stupid enough to carry this thing around? And he was. But the one thing that is true about the Narcos series is it shows that we didn't get along with the CIA. The truth of that is we didn't get along with the chief of station. And him and Javier they were like this with each other continuously. Javier won't take any crap off anybody. Mm-hmm. And like they wouldn't show, they had access to everything we did. They wouldn't let us have access to anything they did. It took the ambassador to order them to give us security clearances so that we could start reading their reports. We could see photography.
And why do you think that is?
Well, they're very territorial.
Well, sure, but what is the information that they're...
Well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Right.
Well, so we finally get access. So when you walk into the CIA section, they automatically turn this little revolving blue lights on to let you know there's an outsider in there. And you see people putting stuff in their desk drawers and putting papers over what they're working on. And they don't want you to see anything. Okay, I'm okay with that. Then for us to review the information, they had, remember the elementary school desks, how small they were with that little bitty chair? You had the chief of station sitting in the corner. His deputy sat here, and they put one of those little desks between their 2 doors so that they could watch us. And we're sitting at this little bitty desk trying to go through reports and photographs and things. And all the reports I ever read were the ones that I'd written 2 days previously. And they attributed the source of the information as a reliable, how they refer to it, as a reliable source of information. They never say anything that's a DEA agent. It's just they're regurgitating exactly what I'd written 2 days prior.
And then showing it to you.
There was a time when Pablo was captured on a wiretap, his voice. And we had lost him for, there was about a 2-month period where right before he was killed where we weren't getting tips. We weren't getting anything related to Pablo. So when he finally came back up, Javier told Colonel Martinez that, Pablo's back on the radio and told him what he said. And the colonel said, "Can I have a copy of the tape?" So Javier goes over to the wire room and says, "Hey, can you make me a copy of that?" And they do. And Javier's going to give it to the colonel, and the chief of station calls Javier and he says, "You're forbidden to give him that information." And Javier's like, "This is their country. This is their property. The wire room is theirs. It's not ours. We just support them." Mm-hmm. And the chief of station threatened to charge Javier with treason if he released that tape. Well, first of all, CIA can't investigate Americans. They can't charge anybody with anything, because that's not their bailiwick. That's not what their area of responsibility is. So what Javier did is he went to the colonel. He says, "Colonel," because the colonel's saying, "Where's my copy?" And he said, "Colonel, here's what's going on." I explained everything to him. He said, "If I were you, I would kick all the gringos, including us, out of the base." Colonel got on a helicopter and flew back to Bogota to meet with the head of the Columbia National Police. And, for whatever reason, they didn't kick us out. And we were getting close to capturing Pablo. It was, we were within probably a couple of weeks, if not days, of the final takedown. But that's the kind of crap we were putting up with down there.
You have to ask why.
But on the other hand, the guys that work in the field never had a single problem with any of them.
Yeah. Obviously, because they're all doing the job, and all of your asses are in trouble.
You're in the hot water.
You're in the hot water with everybody, right? It changes politics a little bit when you're in the same fighting hole together.
Absolutely.
But the powers that be, that's where I'm always like, where's the, some people are playing, checkers, and there's people playing chess.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where the frustration, and, like anything coming from my background, looking at, my involvement in Iraq, my involvement in Afghanistan, the things that we did, one day it's the DEA's there. One day I'm protecting, they're protecting, opium fields. And the next day we're burning them down.
Yeah. Why?
And then the State Department's coming in and saying, why is this important? I don't know. You make national policy. You tell me why it's important. So there's just a lot of back and forth, and you got to, I don't wonder anymore. I'm speaking hyperbole, but
it's frustrating. If one group, you're working in a foreign environment, you would think the one group that's going to stay tight is your own country.
Right.
But it never happens that way.
Right. And I think that's where lives get lost. Progress gets held up,
here's the other thing, we're fighting this war on drugs. I hate doing this, but this is the way it works.
Because that's what it is. It's a war, quote unquote, war on drugs. Right.
So when we go to war, we get our allies together, right? We get all our materials together. We get the best and the greatest people we can possibly get, and we go to win. We're going after the world's most wanted criminal, the world's first narco-terrorist. What did we send? 2 guys. The war on drugs is the biggest misnomer the government's ever come up with. I've never seen...
Let's send Steve and Javier. They'll take care of it.
Well, then it's more like, what idiots can we get to go do this? Oh, yeah, Steve and Javier, send them down there. It was, but every DEA agent in our office would have given anything to be in our shoes.
Yeah.
They're all dedicated to the mission. And we felt like we were doing the right thing. But, I don't think our government has ever taken this war on drugs seriously. Look at the position we're in now with excess of 100,000 overdose deaths every year in our country.
Well, you were saying something that something in the beginning you were saying you're not proud of is America is, how did you say it?
The largest consumer.
And then on top of that, human trafficking.
Yeah. Oh.
The largest consumer of human trafficking.
Yep.
And if you look at what the cartels are doing, that's all of their stuff.
There's an organization called Libertas Internacional. It's a kid from Wyoming. When he was going through college, he was a Mormon, did his missionary time in the Dominican Republic. Sent him over there, didn't even speak Spanish. And he saw things that he didn't realize what he was seeing. It was like young girls sitting on old men's laps. And initially he thought, well, it's a grandfather, granddaughter type thing or something like that. And then came back to college after 2 years. There was a symposium on human trafficking that he decided to go attend, and then realized what he was facing. At 23 years old, started Libertas. It's an anti-human trafficking organization that's based out of Medellin, Colombia. This kid from Wyoming is now 33 years old, been doing it for 10 years. I had him on my show.
Wow.
It's as I'm getting older, I seem to get more sentimental. It seems like I'll tear up over nothing.
Same. I get it.
He's on the show. I had to cut some of this out because, I had tears running down my cheeks talking about what a mother did to her 19-month-old baby, filming it and then selling it to these human traffickers. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. But,
and as I'm interviewing him, I'm making a donation on my other laptop to him immediately. His name's Tyler Schwab. Tyler has opened my eyes to what's really going on. Like you said, Americans and Canadians are the worst when it comes to human trafficking. They're the ones that are taking advantage of so many people. He sends me pictures all the time now of people they're taking down. He's working in conjunction with the Columbia National Police. He's been given awards. HSI here in the United States works with him to help capture these people. When I did his interview, we did it on a Saturday because the next day, Sunday, he had to fly to Vienna, Austria to speak at the United Nations over there. And this kid, 23-year-old kid out of Wyoming, just decides he's going to step up and do something. I'm as proud of him as I am my own children, what he's doing. But it's amazing what's going on out there in the human trafficking realm that most people have no clue about. I have 5 granddaughters.
Again, you have to ask, why is people not talking about it?
I know it.
Why is it not on every freaking newspaper, television show, anywhere?
Yep. And I got my own opinions.
Yep.
I think people of influence are
involved.
Exactly.
Definitely involved.
Exactly.
And so going, where is the state of these cartels now?
Believe it or not, Colombia dropped from the number one country in the world of cocaine production to number 3 several years ago. Still, number 3 is pretty high up, right?
Yeah, of course.
Unfortunately, it's back to number 1. But what we're not seeing
When
is...
did it become number 1?
Originally, or...
No, number 1 again.
Oh,
Just recently?
No, it's been several years.
Why do you think that is?
Just corruption and money, you know. But what we're not seeing now is the big major cartels like you had, when you had Medellin and Cali. Mm-hmm. You're not seeing those big organizations. They're smaller groups, even a lot of mom and pop type operations, more than just a mom and pop, but, like a smaller intimate group. But they're still producing enough cocaine to supply the whole world.
Are they not creating these bigger cartels because when you do that, they become more susceptible to law enforcement? Yeah,
that's what happened. When Pablo decided to get into politics, that's what brought more attention. He did it to himself.
Right.
And even Gustavo tried to talk him out of it.
Your ego and your pride of getting so large. Like, you could have just ran under the radar, made your money, had a good life.
Well, you even look at the deal he got for the prison term. He's in this country club prison. He's only got to do 5 years. He says this is another myth, that he's this dedicated family man. Well, there were no stipulations in his plea agreement to take any of the assets, so he gets to keep the $30 billion. So if you're a dedicated family man, in an environment like that, you could probably stand on your head for 5 years and do a prison term, right? Because he's going out in town whenever he wants to. He's going to spending time with long weekends with his families at the Monaco building where they lived.
He wasn't stuck there.
Oh, no. He came and went as he pleased. He's going to soccer games. He's going to new restaurants. He's going anywhere he wants to go. He's going to the whorehouses, whatever he wanted to do. It's just that proverbial revolving door coming and going.
But it wasn't enough.
No, it wasn't. So if he was a dedicated family man, do your time. Now you're a free man. All the criminal charges, all the crimes you've been committed in your life. A multi-billionaire.
Go be a billionaire.
Still to this day, the richest criminal that's ever been.
Really?
Even Chapo Guzman, the last I saw on him, he's worth $4 billion. Pablo's worth $30 billion. And his son even came out in one article and said that figure's wrong, that it's a whole lot more than that. So
where's all that money now?
Well, that's a good question. There are bank accounts around the world that are in what we call straw purchaser names, fake people, that nobody probably knows about, and the banks don't care if the money ever leaves because they make money off the money.
Right.
Before I retired in 2013, Javier and I were called to Jacksonville, Florida to help out on a case down there. They had found a bank account. It was either in Luxembourg or Liechtenstein, one of the European countries, $80 million. And they had a good, strong enough case that they were able to seize that money. Well, the host government gets half and the United States gets half. But there's probably still money buried, but I'm going to guess it's all rotted by now because this is over 30 years since he was killed. So I don't know, man.
His family didn't get any of it.
They had to pay reparations to the Cali cartel and the North Valley cartel for all the millions of dollars they'd spent and the losses where Pablo was blowing their stuff up. So if you read the book that Pablo's wife wrote, and I've read it, it's called Pablo and Me. It's she explains how things happened after Pablo's death. Mm-hmm. I don't know that I believe them all. They did have to give up a lot of cash, a lot of properties, buildings, artwork, jewelry, all kinds of assets to the Cali cartel to placate them, but certainly not $30 billion worth. And then,
so they're still billionaires.
Yeah, her and her son and daughter moved to Argentina, Buenos Aires. And what I got from her book is it's a poor, pitiful me thing.
Yeah, victim mentality.
Yeah, because I've been the queen, and now I'm having to live like a princess rather than a queen, or it's I think it's pretty ridiculous, but here she proved something that we had always suspected, and it's at the very end of her book. She says that she had an abortion when she was 13 years old because Pablo got her pregnant when she was 12, and Pablo's in his mid-20s. Mm-hmm. So as bad as this guy is, on top of everything else, he's a pedophile.
Yeah.
There's nothing good about this guy whatsoever. His son is trying to promote, his son sends us messages occasionally. The most recent one was from a YouTuber from Italy who's really, really big. He goes by Ali, A-L-E, and he had interviewed Juan Pablo Escobar, and he asked him about Javier and I, and he said, we're nothing more than criminals hiding behind a badge. And of course, he wanted to know, he's in my house filming, the Ali is. And he wanted to know my response, and my response is come and say it to my face. I haven't done everything right in my life. I started off on the wrong foot, have tried to turn things around. But one thing I'm not is a criminal.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we broke policies, rules, and procedures every day in Colombia. We never broke the law.
Yeah.
So I have no. But this other thing is, he's trying to promote this theory now, and this has been going on for a few years, that his dad committed suicide. Oh, my dad told me, he said, you see this gun here? It's got 13 rounds, 12 for them and 1 for me. They'll never take me alive. So he says that the Colombian National Police didn't kill Pablo, that Pablo killed himself. Okay, so I told you there's 3 rounds. He's hit 3 times, leg,
Yep.
butt, ear.
Yeah.
Of course, this is the kill shot.
Yep.
You know that when you pull the trigger, there's bits of gunpowder that follow the bullet out,
Yeah.
travel a certain distance till they lose their velocity and fall to the ground. Even if you could take a pistol and hold it at arm's length and get that thing pointed back and shoot yourself dead in the ear, you're still going to have powder burns. Mm-hmm. It's going to travel that far.
Yeah, of course.
We never put any of our pictures on the internet. All my pictures are on the internet. People take pictures during our shows and they post them. You can see the pictures I took of Pablo's, the kill shot. Take a look at his skin and see if you see any powder burns.
Just a hole.
There's not there. They're not there. So it's just, but you know, at the same time, if my father was Pablo Escobar, I might try to change the legacy too, because I certainly wouldn't be proud of it.
Yeah, like where do you go from that?
He's on this world tour of forgiveness. You know, he's going around asking everybody's forgiveness. When you call me a criminal hiding behind a badge, that doesn't sound like him asking for my forgiveness.
Are they involved in anything, do you think, or do you think they're just living off the money? And
yeah, I think they're probably just still living off the spoils of what their dad did. He's written a book. I think he's done some documentaries, some films. He's on the speaking circuit. We were in we went over and did a Northern European tour before COVID.
Why not change your name?
He did. Sebastian Mariquin.
Oh, so it's not Escobar anymore.
No.
So I think I would have changed my name, kept the money, and just completely
kept my mouth shut.
And kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
And just disappeared and lived my life.
Exactly. He's a big boy. I think he's bigger than I am. But anyway, so we're doing this Northern European tour through Norway and Denmark and Finland and all those countries. And our agent called us and he said, look, I know what the answer to this is, but I've got to ask. He said, Juan Pablo's agent called and said he's going to be in Finland, and he thought it'd be fantastic if the 3 of you went on stage together. I told our agent, I said, I'm going to put this in writing so you never ask me that question again. And I did. And he was apologetic. He said, hey, I'm just doing my job. You know.
Yeah, of course.
And well, I'll never go on stage with him.
No.
You know, Popeye wanted to go on stage with us. They represent everything that we're against. You know, I can't imagine. I guess there are some people that would do it for money. I bet you we could make millions of dollars off of it if we did it. I'm not going to lower myself to that level for money.
It's the same thing to me as like I watch some of these old gangsters that did time and come out and they were mob bosses or whatever, and now they're in the public and they're celebrities. Mm-hmm. And people look at them like and want to take advice from them and things like that.
I know.
I'm like, these are
a couple of them are friends of mine.
Yeah, these guys were evil people. Mm-hmm. They're evil people, and you know, if you ever run into them when they're in that mode, like they don't value human life.
No,
zero whatsoever. And anyways, so leaving. How many years did you do after leaving Colombia?
Left in 1994, and I retired in 2013.
Okay, so good amount of time.
Yeah, I still had a whole career to go.
Yeah, any did you work big cases after that?
Yeah, so after 4 years in Miami and then 3 years in Colombia, you work in massive cases. I got stationed in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'd never seen crack cocaine, but that was the drug of choice during that time. This was 94 to 98. And I connected. We had 5 agents to cover 20-something counties. Didn't have a task force. So we hooked up with the state and local guys. I ended up spending a lot of time in Salisbury, Kannapolis, Concord, Albemarle, all down in that area. Mm-hmm. met some of the best investigators I've ever met in my life. I teamed up with a Salisbury detective and a State Bureau agent. We did what we call an OCDF case, Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force case. And that sounds real important, but it's a funding mechanism, so you know.
Yeah.
In a 2-year investigation, we locked up, I think it was 76 people in federal court on crack cases. But not just, we're not going for the users. That's never been our job, is to go after the distributors. And you always want to climb that ladder. And the organization, there were several organizations that were providing that crack. One was a group out of New York City, which the main guy's first name was Malik. I can't remember his last name. We could pin 30 kilos of crack on him. 30 kilos of crack was a lot of crack.
Where's the cocaine coming from, though?
Exactly. So there's a lot of these cases are plea bargained out, and we had him. And he's a young man, and he hired some big dope attorneys. And when the attorneys come and reviewed our evidence, they went back to Malik and said, you need an agreement because you're looking at 30 to life because of his prior record. Mm-hmm. So Malik's like, you're fired. Hires a Miami attorney, big drug attorney. We show him the evidence. He said, screw you, we're going to court. Okay. I get paid for that too.
Yeah.
Found him guilty. You know what his sentence was? Life. 33 years old, life.
Man, ego is killing these guys.
And he had an opportunity. He could have probably gotten away with 20 years. I mean, he's still going to be 53, but he's still got a life after that.
Yeah.
But whenever in federal court, when you're sentenced, they issue a written document called a J&C, a judgment and committal order. On it, it has date of release. When you're sentenced to life, the date of release, it says upon death. And that's what's on Malik's form.
So when he dies, he's released. Yeah.
But we also tracked down a Haitian organization that was based out of Orlando, and we indicted all of them as well. So you're continually climbing that ladder to get the people who are really responsible.
Did you ever land back in South America or back in Colombia?
I did, but it was more in a headquarters role.
No. I meant as far as tracking where all this is coming from.
No, it was basically Haiti was wide open country. Well, there's another case. After Escobar was dead, Javier and I were still in Bogota, and a walk-in informant comes to the embassy one day, says, I've got information about Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. He's already dead. The cartel's done. So everybody in the embassy knew, hey, if it's related to Medellin, call Pena and Murphy. So we go and get the guy, and we take him up to this secure room in the embassy. And here's his story. He said, I worked for Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel. Since his death, I've become a Christian. I'm trying to atone for my sins, and I feel like that God's leading me to cooperate. Okay, well, what do you want? Well, I want to go to the United States. Well, so I look like a green card walking around to you, huh? So here's what we did is we brought our polygraphers in. We boxed him twice. He passed. Well, here's the story. He said every 3 weeks, Pablo would send me to Haiti. I would meet with the president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. I would deliver him a suitcase of $400,000. In exchange, the president would allow Haitian military bases. We would fly our drug planes into those bases unmolested. And from there, we'd put the loads on coastal freighters or go-fast boats to come into South Florida. So we told the CIA about this. Well, they bring their polygraphers in. Of course, he passes both of those polygraphs. But they also know through, I guess, their spy network what buildings, are in this compound where this informant says that he would take the money, what the room looks like, what color the walls are, what paintings, whatever's hanging on the walls. So they grilled this guy on it. He got everything right. So on my last trip, as I'm permanent, PCSing, permanent change of station out of Columbia to North Carolina, we've got this informant on the plane so I can keep an eye on him. And when we land in Miami, my old enforcement group in Miami is there to meet him, and they take him off to a safe house. Never heard from him again. We were going to indict the president of Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Now, we're just worker bees. We're GS-13 agents.
Yeah, right.
So you got to go. I mean, the White House has to know about that.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
We got, again, through the chain of command, it's the second time it happened where the White House calls down and says, you're not indicting anybody from Haiti. Well, guess who the president was? Clinton. What's his foundation? the Haitian Foundation. Now, can I prove that? No. I was just telling you what my bosses told me as to why we were not going to indict the president of Colombia or Haiti. After retirement, Javier and I went to work. We were doing some contract work with one of the Beltway bandit companies there in Washington, Booz Allen Hamilton. Fantastic company. And we were a training team that we were going down to Dam Neck, Virginia to talk to DevGru. 3-day course, obviously not tactical or operational.
Right.
It's classified, but it really shouldn't be. But you had to be a former SES. So it was, we were the SES from DEA. We had an FBI SES, former ambassador, former chief of station for the CIA, and then our group lead was a retired command master chief for DevGru. In the evenings, we're all staying in hotels. In the evenings, one evening, one of the guys had a company credit card, so we'd invite all the students, all the SEALs to come out and, come on out and have dinner and let's have some beers and just have some fun. And we're there one night, and this one guy, Javier's telling me about the story, and the guy says, "Hey, just so you know, I was the lead on the detail where we took Aristide back and reinstated him in the presidential palace in Port-au-Prince." What's that mean? I don't know. It's just, for a country boy that grew up in the mountains, and it's some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, but you do definitely paint a picture of stuff that we already think anyway.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens in 2025 with the federal government.
I think things are getting ready to change.
I think people are going to be a little freaked out how drastically they're going to change, and rightfully so. So I think I asked you this before. When you left Colombia, or maybe when you retired, what was the mental, physical health? Like, what was your state? Did any of that catch up with you? Did any of it catch up with you? What was the total impact on your family, your wife? Did any of it kind of just smack you in the, because you're living down there, very similar to our deployments, to where you're just going 300 miles an hour. You're not really processing all the death. You're not processing all the evilness. You're just doing the job. Mm-hmm. We're human beings. We're Americans. The life does mean something to us. At some point, that stuff catches up to you. Did it ever? If it did, when did it?
You may not believe this. So 6 years as a city cop, I was in several shootings. Mm-hmm. Even as a railroad cop, I was in some shootings. DEA, I've been in some shootings. I believe that God gives us all a gift. Mine was to be able to participate in these type of operations and not have any bad feelings about it. Not that I'm cold-blooded or anything, but I just always felt that what we did was right. Yeah. That there was nothing to feel guilty about. The only one that ever bothered me in my entire career was when my partner got shot, and that was survivor's guilt. Yeah. And he survived.
It's funny you say that. I bring that up for a reason. I think that the most things that I probably struggled with wasn't killing. It wasn't being in combat and watching bad guys die or taking the fight to the enemy. That I slept sound as night every night afterwards. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But when your people got hurt, man, that leaves a mark that you just can't get rid of. It just doesn't go away.
And even that one, I'm certainly not claiming PTSD, because I've seen people suffering PTSD, and I certainly don't believe that's what it was. I was shell shocked for about 2 weeks, and by that I mean loud noises. I'm on the ground. I'm looking for weapons, and I got to give credit to my wife again here. She, as a registered nurse, tough girl. I think she did it because she thought it was funny, but it ends up helping me in the long run. We'd be in the house, and if I had my back turned, she might slam a kitchen cabinet or something, and that loud noise. But I'm on the ground. I'm looking for weapons. I'm looking for a knife. Where's my gun? And she's kind of laughing at me, and I think that was a little bit of a dose of reality. That, hey, stupid, you're safe. You're not in that shooting anymore. You've been in worse than this. Why do you worry about? Kevin's going to be okay. Yeah, the informant was killed, but life goes on.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker to that too is, the senior agents are coming to you after Kevin got shot, and they're like, "Murphy, you been to counseling yet?" "Yeah, I'll get to it." I never went. I thought I was a tough guy, Man, I've been a cop for X number of years. I'm a tough guy. I put up this stuff.
I said the same thing.
until I retired at the end of June in 2013, I continually had dreams from 1998 about the shooting, not nightmares, just reliving the shooting over and over and over again.
It's a memory that's misplaced in your. It's like sticking up in a filing cabinet. It's not filed appropriately. Yeah.
And as time went on, they became fewer and fewer.
Yeah.
Again, I didn't have nightmares. I didn't wake up in cold sweats or any of that stuff. But when I retired from DEA, I haven't had a dream since. And the other thing is, when Kevin was off for a year, he came back to work. And, of course, we were still – my wife's always been the kind of person that if you're my partner, you're family. Mm-hmm. So if like in the embassy with Javier, if she baked me a bunch of chocolate chip cookies, he's going to get a big batch too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just family thing. Kevin and I, when he came back to work, we never talked about the shooting. It was just like, hey, welcome back, man. Let's get the job. What's the next case we can do? And just rolled right into it. You know when we talked about the shooting? On my podcast about 2 years ago.
Wow.
And that happened in 1989. And it's funny because we remember things completely different.
Of course.
You know.
Yeah.
And I know I'm right because, it's me. It's Murph.
Well, that's good. Do you think that do you think your faith had anything to do with that?
Absolutely. I told you. I mean, you've known me now for, about a year? I'm not a tough guy. You saw me talk last year at the Corps Medical Group Military Appreciation Week. We sold out the Sydney Opera House in Australia. I've talked to thousands of people. That's one of the few audiences I've ever been nervous in front of because,
No need.
Well, I know that now, but I'm thinking, I'm looking at everybody in there as a hero. I've never seen that many service dogs in one place at the same time.
Yeah.
You guys have been through it and survived to talk about it. I mean, you, Jason, Cody, Lou Velozzi, all these studs in there. And I was afraid of not, I guess embarrassing myself for not living up to y'all's expectations. And the response I got was just overwhelming afterwards. So I know now that that's kind of silly. And I went and met Sid and Mel Chansey. Mel was speaking in Orlando a few weeks ago and at a fundraiser. So I went and met him and Sid there and had dinner with him. And
speaking of former criminals.
Yeah. But here's the thing, too. Absolutely, man. Here's the thing. I was a cop for 38 years. You think I would ever invite the former president of the Hells Angels out of Chicago to stay in my house? I did. Right. Now, I got Mama's permission on that to start with. But man. I invited him and Little Mel to come and stay. And, of course, they already had hotels and everything. But when a former criminal like that says that they're a Christian is the reason they got out of crime, I'll follow them. I'll stalk them a little bit just to see if they're living up to it. Mel lives up to it every single day.
Every single day.
I see his podcast or his devotional on Instagram every day. I really admire the guy that he's able to turn his life around.
I will call, I might be struggling with something. I'll call Mel. But, hey, Mel, this is what's going on. What do you think?
Yeah.
And he's just the most love, caring, prayers, everything.
The first time I ever met him, I've known about it. I've been trying to get him on my podcast. Can't because of the movie that's being produced. I met him through Lou Velozzi.
He's always like, I know. I just, let me get through this thing.
Yeah. Well, I met him there at Sid's house in Beaufort. And I saw him over there and he was talking to Sid and somebody else. So I finally made my way over there and I said, hey, Mel, I'm Steve Murphy. He's like, I know who you are. And just he's like a muscle with a head and legs on him though. Picks me up, gives me a big bear hug. And we're talking and I saw the bracelet he had on his arm, Jarm 316, which is his ministry.
Yeah.
And I said, where can I get one of those? Didn't hesitate, ripped it off his arm, said, hold your arm out here and put it right on my arm. Still got it to this day.
Nice.
I just think the world of the guy.
So wrapping up really quick, between this book and the show, what can people expect? What are the differences that you would want people to know?
The show is Hollywood. The book is the truth.
Okay.
If you're having trouble sleeping, it's a sure cure for insomnia, the book is. No, I'm kidding there. The Narcos series, there is a lot of truth in there. This first 2 seasons is about us and Pablo Escobar. We figure about a third of what you see is true. Those events happen. They're depicted correctly. The second third, those events happen, but they've been changed dramatically for dramatic purposes.
For entertainment.
Yeah. And then
some of the stuff that we do, in your job, my old job, believe it or not, sometimes it's just not that exciting.
Right. They don't want to see us sitting at the embassy writing teletypes.
It's a lot of it's boring work. You know?
It is. And surveillance is horrible. It's always
it's
bad.
a lot of boring work, a lot of sitting around, and then you have like 5% action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that last third's just straight out make-believe Hollywood. Right. But here's an interesting fact of the show is if you watch that scene, it's episode 10 of season 1 where Murphy gets kidnapped. Mm-hmm. First of all, I was never kidnapped. But the actor that plays me, Boyd Holbrook, and we've stayed in touch now. I actually had him on the show. Just got to be friends. He came up with the idea of my 2 daughters who are Colombian were with us down there for filming. And he says, hey, you think the girls would like to be in the scene? I said, sure. I asked them. They're like, oh, yeah, And so they dress him up. As he's pulling in the driveway, he has to stop because he got extras walking up and down the sidewalk. And you'll see him in the show. He motions for these 2 girls to walk in front of the car. That's my daughters, my real daughters. Yeah.
What are they doing now?
One is works for an internet service provider in the D.C. area and HR. Mm-hmm. And the other is now a stay-home mom.
And they've read this?
I guess so. They've never asked questions.
Really? Interesting.
I shocked my family. When I retired from DEA, I shocked everybody because I know how to be a cop. I don't know how to do anything. Now I'll go around and make an idiot out of myself on stage. But even my oldest son, who's an orthopedic surgeon, when he found out I was retiring, he's like, Dad, what are you going to do? You are DEA. That's who you are.
Yeah.
So it really, and then when they saw the show come out, especially my older son, he's like, yeah, you didn't tell me about this and that and the other. Well, there's just certain things you don't tell your family.
Yeah, right. Of course. But they've all supported it and taken it well.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
I was just in Phoenix last week. You go like this. My son's an orthopedic surgeon, so he does pediatric spinal surgery.
Oh, bless his heart, man.
This is one of my kids I thought would go to jail. He was me all over again. Okay, so he becomes this doctor. So he's very well known in his field. Works at Children's Hospital of Atlanta. So there's a spinal conference or congress or symposium, whatever they call it, last week in Phoenix. And each year they'll bring in one speaker who has nothing to do with the medical field to talk. And you only get 15 minutes. And so he convinced them to let me come. Well, first of all, it's a paid trip where I get to hang out with my kids. So that's always a good thing. But I got up there and did my little talk, and they've got the clock on, you've got 15 minutes because reception's after me.
On the stage right there so you can see it.
Yeah. And the bar's open when I finish. So I'm not going to keep these people late.
Yeah, right.
And there's a couple hundred people in there. And that night afterwards and the next day, all day, and the next evening, people were coming up like, man, we want to hear more. We want to hear more. So it looks like I might get an invitation to go to next year's conference with, like an hour and a half. It's not going to be in Phoenix. It's going to be in Nice, France.
Oh.
Yeah. Mama's already said she's going on the trip.
I'm going on this one.
Yeah.
So, Steve, what are you doing now? What's the next mission?
So my prayer is, God, show me what you want me to do. How can I promote you? And this, like I said, this speaking thing is going on 9 years now. I'm not bashful about telling people I'm a Christian and that I believe in God. Give him credit for everything. And so I tell him, if you open a door, I will have faith to step through that door. And then once I get in there, if that's the wrong door, push me back out. But don't let me be disappointed because I think life's an adventure and a lot of this stuff's exciting because I've never gotten to do it before. So if I'm in the wrong door and you push me back out, don't let me be disappointed. Just show me what the next door is you want me to step into. So I'm probably working more hours now than when I was an agent, believe it or not. Between the podcast, which is extremely is a one-man show. My co-host left in April. I'm doing all the editing, the scheduling. If you have a book, I'll read your book before you come on the show. That kind of thing. Extremely busy. Hotel room last night. That's all I did was I got me some food there at behind the counter. That crappy stuff they have, and sat there and edited for about 6 hours. Still have a speaking business where it's died down to maybe 20, 25 events a year. We're already booking for next year, so it doesn't show any signs of slowing down any. I've done this past year this year they had a show come out. You've heard of CSI Miami? Yeah. Well, they did a reality show called, well, not reality, I guess a docuseries called The Real CSI Miami. And so I'm on a couple episodes of that, talking about murder cases, old murder cases. Still doing documentaries, doing a ton of interviews on podcasts and different, get called on Fox and Newsmax occasionally. But then there's a couple of nonprofits. I support the DEA Educational Foundation. A couple of the Southern California Game Conference. This is my 6th year, I think, of going out there with them. But then there's one other project we call the Lost Clipper. And it involves the disappearance of 15 Americans in 1938 in the South Pacific in Micronesia. Our theory is that there was Pan Am had a flight called the Hawaiian Clipper. They had 4 planes they called the Clipper series, and these are seaplanes. Massive. I mean, you got to see a picture. They're massive. And the Hawaiian Clipper, they didn't have the fuel capacity to go very far. So they would have to island hop to get from San Francisco to, say, Guam or Chiang Mai or wherever. The 15 Americans that were on that flight, when it took off from Hawaii, heading to Guam, that's when it disappeared. What we believe is two Japanese spies were able to hide on the back of the Hawaiian Clipper. Once it got to the point of no return for that next leg, they came out with guns and skyjacked the plane, forced it to land in Truk Lagoon, which is Micronesia. Truk Lagoon is supposed to be the best wreck diving site in the world because that was the Japanese Pearl Harbor. There's planes and ships and everything sunk there from the Allies bombing. What we believe is that they took the 15 people, put them on the island of Tonawas in Truk Lagoon, that was Admiral Yamamoto's headquarters. Eventually, they poisoned them and buried them there. And they took the Hawaiian Clipper, flew it to Japan, reverse engineered the engines. And there's some theories that those might have been the engines put on the Zero fighters that attacked Pearl Harbor several years later. Okay. So I've been to Micronesia twice, most recently this past April. It was my 2nd trip, but it was the team's 5th trip. Javier and I are the lead investigators for this investigation. Our leader is a guy named Guy Knopfsinger, who's a retired naval intelligence officer, and then he did some stuff for NASA, and he's a professional videographer now, and he's won Emmys and all this stuff. So here's what we believe, is that the Hawaiian Clipper, I already told you about, they reverse engineered the engines for the Zero fighters, but one of the passengers that disappeared was an Asian businessman from Newark, New Jersey, who was reportedly in possession of $3 million in bearer bonds or bearer notes. It's not cash, but if you hold that piece of paper, it's good as cash. He says that he was going to give that money to Chiang Kai-shek in China because China was at war with Japan at this time, and $3 million was about 50 American fighters and a year's worth of maintenance. What we believe is that $3 million was going to be given to the Japanese as ransom for Amelia Earhart, who disappeared in 1937.
What?
I know. I get goosebumps every time I say it because life's an adventure, man.
How do you make that connection?
Through a lot of old documented reports from old interviews where people were interviewed that were in the know. Like the Hawaiian Clipper just disappeared, but there is one report out there that was it Colonel Doolittle or General Doolittle? I can't remember everybody's names now, but they actually saw that in Japan after Japan surrendered. They saw the plane on a runway, and he ordered it burned, so nobody knew what happened to it. We believe that Amelia Earhart was a spy for Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We've got documentation. She's getting ready to make this around-the-world flight that she disappeared on. Mm-hmm. It's her and her navigator. You want that plane to be as light as it can be so it can carry as much fuel as they can pack on there, right? We've got documentary reports where she was in upstate New York at the Kodak factory looking at cameras that would mount into an airplane to take photography. So then if you look, the United States had stationed picket ships all throughout the South Pacific to help her navigate. Coast Guard and U.S. Navy ships. Why would you do that for somebody that's just trying to set a world record, fly around the world? It's a lot of circumstantial stuff. We don't have any, physical evidence that we can hold in our hands. Although this last trip, we took 2 cadaver dogs with us. We also brought a guy on the team named Jim Janicki, this guy's like MacGyver. I mean, man, he's educated, he's intelligent, loves doing research. He's a chemist by profession. He's an entrepreneur. So he did a lot of research, and he looked at NOAA charts, the National Oceanographic and Aeronautical Association, whatever they call that, and saw where typhoons had blown through Micronesia and how that would have shifted the soil. So through his research, before we went, he said, guys, I think I'm within 50 meters of where the bodies are, probably closer than that. So we take 2 professional cadaver dogs with us. We're staying in the country of Chuk, and we've got to take boats about 45 minutes to get to Tonawas. Tonawas is inhabited, but no electricity, no running water. I don't know how people live like that, but they do. So,
happily, probably.
Yeah. So we get over there, and we've got to take ice for the dog. It's hot. Yeah. And it was like, mid-90s, 98% humidity all day long. First dog, we put one dog in up on the hill so he can't see anything. The first dog goes down, and the way these shepherds, they're both German shepherds, the way they alert is they sit down, they lay down. First dog goes in there, he's not there 5 seconds and lays down. So we start flagging everywhere he lays down. Pull him out, send the second dog in, alerts on the exact same places. We do some digging. We find big pieces of concrete, several that we brought back with us. The story is that when the Japanese killed those 15 Americans, they made them dig their own hole, and then they laid the bodies out 4, 4, 4, and 3. And then they put chicken wire over the bodies to hold them down, because when they poured the cement, the chicken wire prevented the bodies from floating to the top of the wet cement. Well, you don't use chicken wire to reinforce cement, right? You use rebar or whatever the equivalent of that was back during that time. One of the concrete pieces we found has chicken wire sticking out of it. Another piece we can see the side of a tennis shoe. It's got kind of an L shape to it. Mm-hmm. And we can see the side of a tennis shoe here. So just recently, the concrete pieces were sent to a place in Texas that has a very powerful MRI machine to see what we can see down in the concrete. I haven't seen the results of that yet. But obviously what we're hoping is that we can extract some kind of DNA. We're already in touch with some of the family members of those 15 people that disappeared. Yep. See if we can do a familial.
Correlation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, can we ever prove that this isn't related to Amelia Earhart? It's a long shot. I mean, I will be the first to tell you that. But one of the meetings we had years ago was with the crew that found the Titanic, and they're on the same mission to try to find Amelia Earhart or her plane.
Do you think the federal government has documentation of any of that?
I'm sure they do. We had, and I can't remember this admiral's name now. I think he just passed away. He's the former head or deputy of NSA. Well, his name's right on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it. Eventually, he became whoever put him in charge of the National Archives. And he told our people, there is documentation here. It will never be found because the archives are just a total mess. He said years and years of trying to straighten this place out will probably never
happen.
Never find everything you're looking for. So it's an adventure.
Yeah.
We pay for everything ourselves. Everything comes out of our pockets. We have networks waiting for us to come up with a tangible piece of evidence, and then we'll probably get our money back. But I love it. I love it.
Just one investigation after the other.
It is. Just like you, I took an oath.
Yeah.
And just because I retired doesn't mean that my oath ever expired.
Nope.
So if I can go help nonprofits, law enforcement-related nonprofits, if I can help these people who are fighting against human trafficking, if I can just get out there and tell the true story about Pablo Escobar, as long as God gives me that health, that's what I'm going to do.
Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please go follow Mr. Steve Murphy. Go check out his podcast. Very fun podcast, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the goal.
It is a very fun podcast. And then we'll see. Are you coming to the Military Appreciation Weekend?
Oh yeah, my wife says she's coming with me this time.
Awesome. So we'll see you there in February. If you guys want to check that out, go follow Core Medical Group and shoot them a message, and they can get you the link. Other than that, Steve, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you very much for having me, man. It's been a long time coming, and I really appreciate it.
Great story. Absolutely fascinating.
Well, thank you, man.
And thank you for all your work that you've done at keeping evil at bay. And you guys know the deal. Go share this with a friend, and then we never quit. We never surrender. We always keep moving forward.
Move forward.
Peace.